It's pouring rain, and at school, zombies are headed toward a wooden barn. Outside, a guy, Jang Hong, bangs on the door, yelling to be let in. "It's me! They're coming! We need to save him!" Inside the barn, a group of terrified schoolgirls are hiding under a table while three guys are holding the door, unsure what to do. One girl freaks out, insisting they let Jang hang in because he's their classmate. How could they leave him to die? She's relentless, saying he's still talking, so he hasn't been bitten yet. One of the guys, though, panics, shouting that there are tons of zombies out there and Jang Hang's probably already infected. The girl, who is the class president, refuses to back down. She declares she'll take responsibility if anything goes wrong and accuses them of lacking a conscience, as Jang Hong is moments away from being killed. The tension rises. One guy grits his teeth and tells another classmate that, on the count of 3, he's going to open the door and they need to shut it fast once Jang Hang gets inside. The guy agrees, and they start the countdown. Everyone's frozen, holding their breath. As soon as the countdown hits 0, the door swings open. Suddenly, a zombie bursts through the door, knocking Ibi off his feet. Screams erupt as the kids panic. The stunned guy yells that Jang Hang is infected, causing everyone to scatter away from the door. Ibi raises his hand in defense, but the zombie bites down hard, sinking its teeth into his arm. He screams in agony as flashbacks flood his mind. He sees himself, one-armed and in excruciating pain, a horde of zombies, and the head girl shouting for them to run. Next, a vision of a burning city appears, followed by a mysterious dark sphere. A question lingers. "What do you want to do with it?" A hooded man responds, and the answer comes quickly. There are only 2 things he desires. The stranger pulls a lever, and the crowd watches as an adult man with one arm lies inside a time machine. As the lever is pressed, everything fades to darkness. Sparks fly, and a voice echoes. This is revenge and salvation. Then, in an instant, Ibi snaps back to the present, standing once again with his 2 classmates, gripping the door. He stood there, momentarily confused, as distant voices echoed around him. Someone was banging on the door, pleading desperately to be let in. Suddenly, another voice cut through the noise, demanding the door be opened immediately. It was the class representative, fiercely declaring that she wouldn't allow any of her classmates to be left behind. Ibi was shocked to see a face he hadn't seen in ages. Lee Ruoxi, still young. In the future he came from, things were very different, and seeing her like this caught him off guard. She was still shouting at them, using emotional blackmail, trying to guilt them into opening the door. A grin spread across Ibi's face, and he chuckled to himself. "Never forget this day," he thought, relishing the moment. He was thrilled to finally be back in the past, where it all began. Ibi firmly stated, "There are tons of zombies out there. Jang Hang's probably already bitten." He pressed further, his voice cold. "Are you really willing to take responsibility for what happens if we let him in?" The class president, excited and defiant, challenged him. Did Ibi actually see Jang Hang get bitten? Placing her hand on her chest, she vowed, "If anything goes wrong, I'll take full responsibility." With a smile on his face, Ibi invited her, "Why don't you open the door yourself?" He extended his hand toward her, and everyone froze in surprise and anticipation. Lee Ruoxi exclaimed, offended, "What do you mean? Who's the man here, you or me?" The class president continued reproachfully, reminding Ibi that she was a girl and questioning how he could have no shame. Ibi raised an eyebrow, retorting, "What's there to be ashamed of? You're not scared. People like you just talk big while leaving the dirty work for others, so you can take all the glory in the end." Ibi called Lee Ruoxi a hypocrite, prompting her to scream that she had had enough. Determined, she approached the door, pushing aside her classmates. As soon as she turned the doorknob, the zombie burst into the barn, knocking those nearby to the ground. Ibi shouted, "The door has opened!" As chaos erupted, Lee Ruoxi lay on the floor, groaning in pain, staring in shock at the zombie looming over her. The creature opened its mouth, and the schoolchildren screamed in horror, realizing Jang Hong had become infected. One guy shouted that they were trapped. Lee Ruoxi grabbed him by the shirt, pleading for him to save her, pushing him toward the monster. But suddenly, Ibi, grinning predatorily, kicked her in the stomach, sending her tumbling right onto the zombie. As the creature prepared to bite her, Ibi swung a wrench, striking it hard in the skull. The defeated zombie fell to the floor, taking Lee Ruoxi down with it. Lee Ruoxi extended her hand to the guy, pleading for help, but he glared at her, filled with anger. She oppressed me for half my life. Now it's her turn, he thought. Instead of helping, he lifted the door and slammed it shut in her face. Lee Ruoxi, still lying on the zombie, screamed in desperation, "What are you doing?" But he just slammed the door harder. The other schoolchildren gasped in surprise as Ibi menacingly asked them why they were frozen. "We need to help him barricade." One guy responded that he would help, and soon another guy and a girl joined him. Together, they quickly stacked boxes and crates against the door. Meanwhile, Lee Ruoxi screamed in fear from outside, asking what they were doing, desperately knocking and begging to be let in for her own safety. Everyone continued to hold the barricade, while Lee Ruoxi shouted that they couldn't do this to her. She was their head girl. "Nobody moves," she yelled, warning someone outside not to come in. A scream pierced the air, but the schoolchildren stayed resolute, holding the door shut. Eventually, the screams faded into silence. Time passed, and the sun dipped below the horizon. One of the students remarked that Lee Ruoxi had stopped screaming. Another girl wondered if she had escaped. A guy behind them noted that he never expected them to kick out the head girl. Concern crept into a classmate's voice as she expressed how scared she was. Another girl chimed in, saying the guy had always been friendly, questioning why he had changed so much. Ibi stood by the door with a key, turning around menacingly after overhearing their conversation. The girls shut their eyes in fear as he asked with a smile, "Are you really afraid of me?" One of the girls quickly answered, shaking her head, "No, we're not afraid." A classmate by the door, still holding it, chimed in, thanking Ibi, saying that if it weren't for him, the guy would have died because of the head girl. A second student joined in, arguing that Lee Ruoxi deserved it. Because of her, everyone almost died. The third girl supported their comments, noting that thankfully Ibi had reacted quickly. Otherwise, they would have been in serious trouble. Another guy agreed, adding that the head girl had tried to set them all up. Ibi smiled wildly, pleased. "It's good that you're not afraid," he said, reveling in the chaos around him. Ibi asked them to open the door so he could step outside and look around, prompting everyone to stare at him in disbelief. One guy asked, "What did you just say?" Ibi replied, somewhat sarcastically, that it was really mean of him to kick out the head girl and that he wanted to see if she was still alive. Another guy scoffed, urging him not to make them laugh since there were still zombies outside. A third chimed in, saying it was way too dangerous. Frustrated, Ibi indignantly shouted for the door to be opened. One of the guys hurriedly complied, and Ibi stepped out with a wrench in hand. As he emerged from the barn, he noticed that neither the head girl nor Jang Hong was in sight. Did the zombies really leave because of dawn? He wondered, squinting against the bright sun and shielding his eyes with his hand. Suddenly, he heard a commotion behind him. His classmates, who had been watching the whole time, slammed the door shut. A voice from the other side yelled for them to hurry and barricade the door, preventing him from coming back in. Another voice added that he was too dangerous and questioned who he might kick out next. A third person remarked, "Look at that calm expression on his face. He's a natural-born killer." Ibi grinned, enjoying the chaos he had stirred, then looked back at the door, fully embracing the madness around him. The school children inside saw Ibi move forward, their surprise palpable. One of them asked if he was planning to visit them, but then screamed in horror as a zombie appeared on the street, charging straight at him. "Is this guy insane?" someone wondered, but Eb just grinned, squeezing the key in his hand tighter. He dashed toward the monster with determination. The students watching from the window were dumbfounded as the creature let out a terrible roar. With a fierce scream, Eb swung the wrench down, smashing the zombie's head in one blow. "He's really lost it!" one of the guys inside the barn exclaimed in shock. Breathing heavily, Eb lowered the wrench and bent down to the monster's head. He pulled out a small green ball, examining it closely. Joyfully, he exclaimed, "It's energy black gold." He held it up proudly, declaring, "This is the source of doomsday and an indispensable item for mechanics." Zombie footsteps echoed nearby, and Eb turned towards the sound, his face emotionless. An old zombie shuffled forward, locking eyes with him. Without hesitation, Eb gripped his wrench and slammed it down on the monster's head with all his strength. Inside the barn, two classmates watched in stunned disbelief. "Is this a joke?" one of them asked, still processing what they were seeing. Another, equally shocked, exclaimed, "Did Eb really decide to kill all the zombies?" A girl nearby, pale from what she'd just heard, looked nauseous. The fair-haired guy, still staring out the window, continued to comment, "Eb's character has really changed. Just recently he was a timid and inconspicuous guy. He turned to the others, asking, 'Was it all an act?' He's terrifying now." His classmate, struggling to process everything, muttered, "I can't believe Eb is actually this kind of person." In the back of the barn, a girl sat on the floor crying, while the others cowered in horror, hiding under the table, terrified of what they were witnessing. One of the guys, watching Eb relentlessly killing zombies, muttered, "If Eb's that good, maybe he should come back and help us fight." Another classmate in the barn immediately retorted in disgust, "Are you serious? Why would we want that madman back?" The first guy countered, "What else should we do? We're running out of food, and we can't stay hidden in this closet forever, waiting to die." Suddenly, a wrench smashed through the window, sending shards of glass flying toward them. They shielded themselves with their hands as Eb stood outside, asking, "Why are you just sitting in there? Come out and help me kill zombies. It's a blast." Two guys inside, trembling with fear, screamed in panic as a zombie crept up behind Eb, ready to strike. But Eb, always alert, reacted swiftly, kicking the monster in the head with force. Without hesitation, he continued his assault, bringing the wrench down on the zombie's face with brutal precision. The zombie's mouth gushed blood, its teeth shattering from the impact. With one final blow, it collapsed to the ground, utterly defeated. Eb stood over it, his breath steady, the once menacing creature now lying still at his feet. Classmates watched in horror from the window as Eb wiped zombie blood from his face and spat in disgust. "This black zombie liquid is revolting," he muttered. "What if it's contagious?" Eb paused, then turned back to the barn. "I was planning to stick with you guys," he said, his voice steady. "But since I can mutate, it might be better if we part ways here." His tone softened slightly as he added, "I don't want to hurt any of you. I really hope you all survive this time." Eb moves away from the barn, heading towards the school with a wrench resting casually on his shoulder. One of the guys watching him walk off asks, almost in disbelief, "Is he really leaving just like that?" No one answers, and a heavy silence fills the air. Eb walks through the empty school stadium, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. He climbs the stairs with purpose, his mind set, and heads out into the open world. Judgment Day, he thinks to himself, the beginning of the end of humanity. A zombie virus had swept across the globe, infecting nearly 50% of the population. The result was chaos, total economic and political collapse. Every day, the number of zombies grew, and humans, gripped by fear and despair, fought each other relentlessly for food and shelter. plunging into a spiral of endless anarchy. Ibi continued forward, ready for whatever came next. Professor Jangan, a renowned expert on zombies, labeled this period the Dark Era. Ibi couldn't help but think back on it with bitter resentment. It was because of Lee Ruoxi's reckless actions that he had been bitten on the hand all those years ago. To survive, he had been forced to amputate his own hand. After that, his life spiraled into a nightmare. For 50 long years, Ibi wandered, starved, and endured unspeakable violence in a world overrun by chaos. His suffering seemed endless until, one day, he crossed paths with a mechanic. With his dying breath, the mechanic used the last of his strength to send Ibi back in time to the very moment when the apocalypse first began. Ibi continued to walk along the deserted city streets, seemingly unbothered by the surrounding chaos. Two men hid behind a makeshift barricade, watching him from a distance. One of them asked in surprise, "Is he really normal?" The other, just as confused, responded, "How can he just walk down the street with a smile on his face like he's not afraid of anything? Must be mad with hunger, thinking he's got nothing left to lose." He hesitated before adding, "Maybe we should call him over. It's too dangerous out there." But the second man shook his head. "Are you crazy? There's a crowd of zombies at our door, and for all we know, the guy's already infected." As they debated, Ibi kept walking, unaware or maybe just unconcerned about the three zombies standing by a nearby playground. The creatures spotted him, growled, and without warning, charged straight at him. One of the men behind the barricade shouted in panic, while the other muttered, "The guy's decided to die. Poor fool. Must be looking for food." But Ibi, he wasn't fazed. Ibi reacted swiftly, never losing the grin on his face. He was clearly enjoying it. With one smooth motion, he swung the wrench with one hand, decapitating the first zombie. Its disgusting blood sprayed everywhere, but it didn't slow him down. Just as quickly, he moved to the second, smashing its head in with brutal efficiency. The third zombie barely had a chance to react before he was knocked to the ground, its skull shattered beneath Ibi's relentless blows. The two men behind the barricade watched in stunned silence, horrified by what they had just witnessed. "What the hell? How cruel can someone be?" one of them muttered. From behind a nearby window, a curtain shifted. A woman, her eyes filled with anger, glared at Ibi as he wiped the blood from his face. She narrowed her gaze and whispered to herself, "Sooner or later I'll kill him." Ibi stood panting heavily beside the corpses of the fallen zombies. The silence didn't last long, though, as he heard the unmistakable sound of approaching footsteps. 3 more monsters were coming straight for him. He looked at them with frustration and annoyance. As the creatures rushed toward him, Ibi thought to himself how a little noise had turned into such a big chase. Several people watching from behind the safety of their windows commented on the scene, one pointing out, "He's running here." Ibi, noticing a nearby shelter, darted toward it. He began banging on the iron gates, shouting at the security camera positioned near the entrance. "Let me in! I'm wounded, and zombies are chasing me," he pleaded. From a nearby house, 2 men observed the chaotic scene unfolding outside. The older man, nonchalant, lit a cigarette and scoffed. "After stirring up that crowd?" Only an idiot would open the door now. He exhaled a cloud of smoke, watching Ibi struggle with a detached sense of amusement. Beside him, the younger man squinted at the security monitors, frustration evident in his voice as he muttered, "I can't see anything from here." He leaned closer to the screen, trying to make sense of the grainy footage, his nervousness contrasting with the elders' calm demeanor. Despite their differences in attitude, neither made a move to help, leaving Ibi to face the horde alone. Ibi glanced down, realizing time was running out. Suddenly, one of the monsters rounded the corner and lunged at him. With quick reflexes, he swung his wrench, smashing the creature's head. But the others were still coming. Desperate, he threw the wrench at another zombie, causing it to fall. Without wasting a moment, he dropped to the ground and crawled under a small gap beneath the gate. It clanged shut behind him just as the creatures reached the barrier, scratching at it in vain. Eby, now safely inside, breathed heavily, his eyes scanning the area. Eby stood up, his eyes scanning the shelves lined with food in front of him. From behind a table, a girl cautiously watched him, her expression tense. Meanwhile, across the street, a group of guys inside a nightclub discussed the scene they had just witnessed. One of them asked in disbelief, "Did everyone see that?" Another chimed in, astonished. "Who would have thought that kid could kill a zombie?" The guy with a mohawk turned around, shaking his head in awe. 6 monsters, single-handedly, and he even managed to climb into the store across the street. A man sitting casually on a sofa, surrounded by 2 girls, laughed smugly. "Interesting," he said. "Looks like these zombies aren't as tough as we thought if a schoolboy can handle them. If he can do it, so can we." Back in the store, Eby's eyes landed on the girl. A grin spread across his face as he called out to her, "I see you. Why don't you come out? Oh, and hand over the remote control for the roller door quickly." The girl remained silent, frozen in place. Eby sighed theatrically, clutching his chest, and then bent over, pretending to be in pain. "It hurts," he said dramatically. "This wound. Please help me." Concerned, the girl rushed over with a first aid kit. As soon as she reached him, he grabbed her wrist, his grip firm. The girl's eyes widened in panic, and she stammered, "Let me go." Standing there, scared and wearing only her shirt, she trembled. Eby pulled her closer with a mischievous grin. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'm not going to eat you. You don't have to be afraid." Eby tightened his grip on the girl's wrist before letting go, his eyes fixed on the remote control in her hand. "Just give me the remote and I'll let you go," he insisted. The girl screamed, panic rising in her voice. "What kind of remote control are you talking about?" She held it tightly, her fear evident. Noticing her hesitation, Eby's tone turned sharp. "Just hand it over," he demanded. Eby snatched the remote in a flash, and the girl dashed behind the table, peeking around the corner with wide, frightened eyes. He caught the remote and kicked the shelf in frustration. "Are you an idiot?" he yelled. "I was just bluffing about the injury. How can you believe a stranger so quickly? You're way too easy to trick." Eby's harsh tone cut through the tension, mixing frustration with a strange sense of amusement. Eby recalled the painful memory of that rainy day from his past life. He had been lying on a bloody bed in a grocery store, and the same girl had bandaged his wounded hand, offering a smile of relief when she finished. Eby thanked her for saving him, and she replied that it was dangerous outside, explaining her father had told her to stay in the store. She took away the first aid kit, and as she left to gather food, Eby thought to himself what a kind girl she was. Throughout his long journey, she was the only person who opened the door for him, likely saving him from death by blood loss or a zombie bite. Suddenly, sounds from the first floor broke the silence. Eby overheard the girl asking a group of people what they were doing. Several men had entered the store. A tall man thanked her for opening the door, grinning maliciously. The girl, now frightened, questioned them, reminding them that they had said they were starving. The tall man dismissed her words coldly, saying it no longer mattered because all the food in the store now belonged to them. 2 men behind the tall man smirked, their expressions filled with malice. The tall man stepped closer, grabbing the terrified girl's face. She struggled, her voice trembling as she pleaded, "Please let me go. My father will be back soon." The tall man's cruel smile deepened as he responded coldly, "We've already met your father?" He paused, savoring her growing fear. "We used him as bait to lure the zombies away. So it's just you and us now?" His words sent a chill down her spine as he continued with a twisted grin, "And nothing's going to stop us from doing whatever we want." He licked his lips in anticipation, his eyes gleaming with perverse intent. The girl's face turned pale with horror, her heart pounding as the gravity of the situation sunk in. She was completely at their mercy. While the men tormented and mocked the girl's father, things took a dark turn. She was abused, raped, and ultimately killed, all because of her kindness. Meanwhile, Eb had been hiding behind a wall, paralyzed with fear, covering his mouth to stay silent. She was lying there dead, and I was too much of a coward to do anything to leave the one person who saved my life and gave me food in this apocalypse, Eb thought bitterly, filled with regret. Back then, Eb had been paralyzed by fear, but now he swore to himself that he would repay that debt and save her. Still, he thought grimly, she needed to understand that darkness lurked even under the sun. Even if it made her think poorly of him, she had to face this harsh reality. In the present, Eb was interrupted by a knock on the door. Annoyed, he shouted, asking what she wanted and to stop bothering him while he showered. The girl, standing outside, quietly explained that she had noticed his dirty clothes and brought him fresh ones. Eb winced and told her to leave the clothes at the entrance and get out immediately. With her head down, the girl left. Eb muttered to himself, wondering how someone so obedient could survive in a post-apocalyptic world. It didn't matter, though. He hadn't had a shower this good in a long time. With zombies multiplying, clean water was becoming scarce, and the supply here would likely be cut off in a few days. Stepping out of the stall and drying his hair with a towel, he felt lucky to have the store's resources. At least they'd last a while. Eb stared at himself in the mirror, deep in thought. He realized it was time to start hunting for proper equipment and weapons. Seeing himself young again brought a strange sense of nostalgia. No back pain, no aching legs, youth felt like a blessing. Youth felt. Touching his stomach, he smirked and muttered that he needed to work on his abs. Stepping out of the shower, he noticed the clean clothes left by the door. He picked up a white shirt, inspecting it closely. "Why this suit?" he yelled in frustration. "How am I supposed to fight zombies in this?" The girl, sitting downstairs, heard his outburst and was left confused, unsure of what she had done wrong. At the nightclub, Scolopendra stood confidently in the center of the room, resting a knife on his shoulder. His voice cut through the air as he told everyone to listen up. This karaoke bar might have alcohol and food, but it wouldn't be enough to survive long term. They needed to create a new survival base to handle the hardships ahead. Pointing the blade of his knife towards the store, where zombies crowded the entrance, he declared that they would kill all the monsters, take over the store, and secure their supplies. He grinned, adding that there was a cute little girl living in the store. If his memory was right, she was the only one left, except for some schoolboy who'd recently shown up. Two men exchanged glances, their expressions turning predatory. Scolopendra barked the order. They would kill the zombies, seize the food, and take the girl. The group, armed with various weapons, laughed as they prepared to move out and rush towards the store. In the grocery store, the girl sat nervously eating when she heard Eb's approaching footsteps. He appeared, now dressed in clean clothes, and demanded she answer his earlier question. Standing over her, he asked if she lived alone and where her family was. Timidly, the girl explained that her father had gone to get supplies and promised to return soon. Without warning, Eb slammed his hand on the table, his voice rising in anger. "You're a fool!" he shouted. "Why would you let a stranger in when you're alone? Are you seriously not afraid I might do something to you?" Startled, the girl tried to explain, trembling. "You said you were hurt. I saw you covered in blood." Eb cut her off harshly. "Didn't you see the zombies chasing me? Did you even think about what was going on?" The girl, overwhelmed, covered her ears as he yelled. She stammered that she had seen. It all on the CCTV cameras, and yes, there were many zombies. Frustrated, Eb rubbed his temples. "You're such a naive coward," he muttered. You'll just be a burden eventually, and it might be better to get rid of you now. Pausing, he sighed, and then continued. But I'd be bored without someone around, and I need someone to take care of me. So listen carefully, you're going to do whatever I say from now on. His eyes bore into hers as she stared back in shock, clutching her chest in fear. And if you disobey me even once, he added coldly, pointing directly at her, I'll kill you. Outside the nightclub, chaos erupted as a horde of zombies charged toward the armed men. A monstrous figure bit down on a guy with a mohawk, tearing into him while the others quickly overwhelmed him. His screams filled the air, but he was helpless against the relentless assault. One man shouted in disbelief, "Why are they going crazy all of a sudden?" Another, trying to make sense of the situation, pointed out, "But that schoolboy somehow beat them." Scolopendra, unfazed by the panic, roared, "Kill the monsters! Push forward, or we'll all die here!" His commanding tone echoed, but fear was spreading through the group. One of the men, unable to cope, turned to flee, but Scolopendra grabbed him by the hair, dragging him back and tossing him into the ravenous crowd of zombies. "How can you do this?" the man cried, but his question was cut short as the zombies devoured him. The rest continued their desperate fight, hacking away at the seemingly endless tide of undead. Someone asked in a panic, "Why are there more and more?" No matter how many we kill, they keep coming. Realizing they were losing ground, Scolopendra barked, "Retreat!" In an instant, the remaining survivors scrambled, fleeing from the overwhelming horde as the undead closed in. In the store, the girl entered the room where Ibi was sitting with ball he found in the zombie's head. She shyly informed him, "I made noodles for you that you asked for," placed the thermos of boiling water on the table. Ibi, preoccupied with his thoughts, looked at her and replied coldly, "I don't need anything else for now. Leave and don't disturb me until I call for you." Nodding, the girl quietly left, and the door shut behind her. Ibi opened the noodle package and began eating. The taste sparked a wave of nostalgia, but he knew that in a few years, food like this would become a rare luxury. As he ate, he heard a commotion outside and glanced out the window, curious about the noise. Suddenly, the window shattered. A hand grabbed the windowsill. It was Scolopendra, the man from the nightclub. He growled angrily, cursing the zombies chasing him. Only now did he notice Ibi calmly eating noodles, staring back at him. "Help me climb up, kid," Scolopendra barked, desperation creeping into his voice. "You know I'll kill you if you don't." Ibi glared at him with clear distaste, picking up the thermos the girl had brought. Scolopendra's eyes darted nervously to the thermos. "What are you doing with that?" he asked, fear edging his voice. Without a word, Ibi twisted the lid and poured the scalding water over Scolopendra's hand. The man screamed in agony, releasing his grip on the windowsill. Ibi smirked darkly. "If you're going to kill me, I'd rather kill you first." At that moment, two small hands clutched Ibi's sleeve. He turned to see the girl, her eyes wide with fear, pleading softly. "Please stop. Let him in. Don't hurt him." Scolopendra, still reeling from the burn, turned his gaze to her at the same time as Ibi. Ibi scowled, his voice filled with frustration. "I told you not to come in unless I called for you. Besides, you don't even know this man." With tears in her eyes, the girl quietly responded, "My dad always said, you shouldn't hurt people." For a moment, the room was filled with silence. Ibi stared at her incredulously. "Are you seriously not afraid I might kill you?" The girl hesitated, her uncertainty giving Scolopendra the perfect moment to exploit. His voice, dripping with false sincerity, filled the room. "I don't mean any harm. I was just hungry and desperate. The zombies trapped me, and I had no choice but to come here. Please let me stay, just until it's safe." As he spoke, Scolopendra slowly climbed through the window, nearly inside the room. Ibi clenched his jaw, glancing back at him with frustration. He knew he should have thrown the man back into the horde when he had the chance. But killing him in front of the girl would only complicate things, making his already tenuous control over her fragile trust even harder to maintain. With the corner of his eyes, he observed a paper cutter lying on the table. Skolopendra's grin widened as his foot touched the floor. Ibi's eyes flicked to the knife resting on the table. The man grinned smugly, brushing off the dust from his clothes. "Thanks for your kindness," he sneered. "But now this place belongs to me. Anyone who disobeys will die." The girl stood frozen, her face drained of color as the horrifying realization set in. Ibi could see her trembling, caught between fear and the naivety that had allowed Skolopendra to exploit her goodwill. Meanwhile, back at the nightclub, the situation was growing desperate. A crowd of zombies battered at the doors, their ravenous growls echoing through the room. Two men who had managed to escape the worst of the chaos pressed themselves against the doors, holding back the relentless horde. One of them, struggling to keep the door shut, yelled in panic, "The zombies are about to break through! We can't hold them any longer!" The other man, his face twisted in anger, spat back, "If it weren't for that idiot's plan, we could have lasted here for months. Where the hell did Skolopendra go after we got swarmed? He's probably hiding on that store's roof. Let him die there for all I care." As the pressure from the zombies mounted, the door began to buckle. One of the men shouted to two girls sitting off to the side on the sofa, "Stop crying and get over here and help hold the door!" But in his mind, the man was already plotting his escape, smiling at the thought of ditching everyone else. His eyes darted toward the balcony. "All that's left is to run and jump while they're distracted with the door," he thought smugly. Skolopendra's laughter filled the room, dripping with malice as he taunted, "This girl is so cute. Did she really choose to believe me?" He smirked, his gaze locking onto her trembling form. "Don't be scared," he said, almost mockingly. "I won't kill you. No. Instead, I'll teach you everything. We'll be together passionately." His smile widened as he invited her to become his slave. The girl was frozen in place, unable to comprehend the horror unfolding in front of her. Then Skolopendra turned his attention to Ibi. "And you," he snarled. "How dare you? Scald me with boiling water? Feeding you to the zombies would be too easy. No, I need time. Time to think of a proper way to torture you, then kill you." His eyes gleamed with madness as he described what he planned to do. "I'll crush your bones, then cut off your limbs. When they're dried out, I'll stuff them into flower vases. It'll be a masterpiece." Ibi stayed silent, his grip tightening around the utility knife in his hand. He could feel the cold metal, steadying him against the chaos around him. His mind raced, trying to decide whether to strike now or wait for the right moment. But one thing was certain. Skolopendra wasn't leaving that room alive. Suddenly, the girl, still trembling but trying to mask her fear, spoke up. "Our family owns this store," she said quietly, then continued more confidently. "There's a lot of food downstairs, enough for everyone." Skolopendra turned to her, a look of surprise flickering across his face. Even Ibi, still clutching the knife, shifted his gaze toward her. "We have hot sticks, chocolates, instant noodles," she added, her voice gaining strength. "And bear-shaped cookies, too." Skolopendra raised an eyebrow, caught off guard by the girl's sudden change in tone. She smiled widely, almost innocently, as she continued, "It's better for us to enjoy everything together. Once we're full, we'll forget all our problems, right?" Her words hung in the air, an eerie contrast to the tension in the room. Skolopendra screamed, clutching his severed hand, his face twisted in agony. Ibi gripped the knife, ready for another strike, but Skolopendra reacted quickly, catching Ibi's hand mid-swing. With a powerful kick to the stomach, Ibi was sent crashing to the floor, the girl falling beside him. Scolopendra, shaking from the pain, smiled maniacally through gritted teeth, declaring that nothing had ever taken so much from him as Ebe had. Ebe, gasping for breath, felt sharp pain shoot through his side. His ribs were likely broken. Scolopendra stepped hard on his foot, eliciting a scream of pain from him. The man leaned in, demanding to know how Ebe had dealt with the zombies so effortlessly. "We lost many men, and we only managed to kill a few," he spat. But before he could finish, Ebe grinned, his eyes filled with defiance. "If you really want to know," he said, through clenched teeth, "you'll have to show a little respect first." Scolopendra's face twisted with contempt. "Respect? Since you won't talk, I'll trample you to death instead," he sneered, launching a series of brutal kicks while Ebe lay helpless on the ground. The girl watched in horror, frozen with fear. Ebe's thoughts raced as the blows landed. Trying to teach this girl a lesson is already costing me dearly. But then, he shouted desperately, "Stop! I know the way, I'll tell you!" Scolopendra paused, grabbing Ebe by the shirt and pulling him close. "If you tell me, maybe I'll make your death quicker," he hissed. But Ebe, ever defiant, spat in Scolopendra's face. Furious, Scolopendra hurled Ebe into the wall with all his strength and then followed up with a savage kick to the stomach. "You think this is a game?" Scolopendra raged, his voice filled with madness. "We'll play until death!" he roared, raining down kicks, his voice growing louder as he screamed, "Die!" before landing a vicious kick straight to Ebe's face. At that moment, the girl, trembling but determined, grabbed the stationary knife and drove it into Scolopendra's shoulder. He turned, surprised and enraged, and shoved her aside, grabbing the knife. He screamed that he'd kill her, but before he could strike, Ebe, with all his remaining strength, smashed a stool over his head, sending Scolopendra crashing to the floor. Ebe, exhausted, sat down and sighed. "Well, he's not dead yet. Stop whining and go wash up." The girl, still stunned, asked again, "He's not dead? We need to help him." Frustrated, Ebe shoved her out the door. "I've never met someone so weak-minded. She's just a fool," he thought bitterly. "And this freak ruined my room." Without another thought, Ebe grabbed Scolopendra by the leg and dragged him to the window. With one swift motion, he threw the man out onto the roof. Scolopendra's body fell toward the street, where the zombies immediately swarmed him. Scolopendra lay surrounded by a writhing mass of zombies, their decaying fingers clawing and grasping at him. His eyes fluttered open just as a searing pain shot through his skull. A zombie had sunk its teeth deep into his flesh. Another reached inside his mouth, grotesquely tugging at his cheek, stretching the skin in a horrifying display. More zombies piled on top of him, their rotting hands tearing into his flesh, feasting upon him with unrestrained hunger. Ebe stood at the window, a silent observer of the gruesome scene below. He watched with cold detachment, his expression unchanged, as chaos erupted around Scolopendra. No flicker of sympathy crossed his face. "If only I had a better knife. I would have cut off your arms and legs before tossing you out." These are the parting words he got from him. Ebe called out, asking if there were any survivors nearby. The man, nervously glancing around, replied that there was no one left. They had tried to block the doors, but someone had eventually loosened their grip, allowing the zombies to break in. "Now everyone is dead," he said, desperation in his voice. Yes, the man is asking Ebe for help, hoping that he might offer some kind of assistance in the dangerous situation he's trapped in. Ebe simply declined the man's desperate plea. "No," he said coldly. "If you don't want to end up as zombie food like that trash down there," he gestured toward Scolopendra's remains, "you better run while you still can." The guy glanced back at where Scolopendra lay beneath a writhing mass of zombies. Horrified, he pressed himself harder against the pipe before pushing off and leaping to the next balcony. Ebe watched him coldly, thinking, "Pity the zombies didn't finish off all the garbage. Let's hope he doesn't cause any more problems. As night fell, E.B. opened the door and saw the girl still sitting on the floor, her eyes fixed on the blood streak by the window. He sighed. "Why are you still here? I told you to take a shower." She looked up, her voice soft and uncertain. "Did he escape?" E.B. smirked. "Do you seriously believe he made it past all those zombies?" "Only if he wasn't human." Her face dropped in sadness. "Why did you kill him, even if he was bad? Maybe he could have changed." Frustrated, E.B. slammed his hand against the wall. "You're such a fool! Haven't you ever heard of the fable about the farmer and the viper? He was a bad man. If you try to save someone like that, they'll just turn on you." His voice sharpened with each word. "This is the end of the world. You either kill people like him or they'll kill you. Don't you get that?" She stared at him, her expression pensive. "The apocalypse." E.B. turned away, feeling exhausted. "It's pointless talking to you. I'm going for another shower. My whole body aches." The girl walked towards E.B., as if trying to say something, but before she could finish, she slipped and fell against him. Concern flashed across E.B.'s face. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, quickly picking her up and carrying her to the bed. He leaned over her, checking for injuries, pressing his hand against her forehead. She was burning up. Something was definitely wrong. E.B. rushed to the closet, rummaging through it. There had to be medicine somewhere. As he searched, his thoughts raced. This had been going on for too long, but he couldn't recall why. Finally, he found a first aid kit. Exactly what we need, he thought, relieved. As he opened it, a small pink book caught his eye. Curiosity got the better of him, and he flipped through it. It wasn't just any book. It was a personalized journal of donations. In the pages, the girl had written about her chemotherapy sessions. "It didn't hurt at all today," one entry read. "I even got to play with my friends. The doctor said that thanks to many people's help, I could get treatment. So, in the future, I want to be kind like them." E.B. froze. This wasn't just a random notebook, it was her medical record. He looked back at the unconscious girl, the reality sinking in. The record included her age and diagnosis: leukemia. Her name was Yao Yu-er, and she was only 14 years old. E.B. gently lifted the sleeve of the girl's shirt, revealing her arm covered in bandages. Her legs, too, were wrapped the same way. He stared for a moment, trying to process it all. Was this really why she wanted to save that monster of a man, Scolopendra? It didn't make sense to him. The world that was kind to her, it no longer exists, he thought grimly. Reaching into his pants pocket, E.B. pulled out the energy black gold. He stared at it, feeling its weight in his hand. "I have this," he muttered to himself. But could it help? The night dragged on, silent and heavy, as he pondered. By the time morning light crept in, the question still lingered. E.B. woke up and sat back, watching as Yao Yu-er prepared to leave and make breakfast. "Are you feeling better?" he asked. She nodded, a hint of relief in her voice. "Yes, I am. Till have instant noodles. Don't forget to add sausage," he called after her. Just as she was about to leave, he added, "And get your things ready. We're going to search for your father." She didn't understand what he meant. Yao Yu-er paused, looking at him in surprise. "We're going to look for my dad?" she asked, as if trying to confirm. E.B. nodded. "You said he went out for supplies, right? This place doesn't feel safe anymore, so I want to find him and leave with you. But my dad told me to stay here until he got back," she explained nervously. "He said to lock myself in and not go anywhere." "How long has it been since he left?" E.B. asked. Yao Yu-er hesitated, then lowered her head. "About 3 days." E.B. raised an eyebrow. "How long does it usually take him to get supplies?" "About half a day," she replied quietly. E.B.'s voice grew more serious. "He's been gone for 3 days without any word. What do you think might have happened? Zombies? A trap? If he's waiting for help, who's going to save him if we don't? Yao Yuer trembled at the thought and shouted, "Nothing happened to him. He called me and said he'd be back soon." Ibi looked at her, his tone steady but firm. "And yet he hasn't come back. No news. If we don't go, who will?" The girl replied that her dad had told her not to leave the place until he returned. Ibi stood up angrily and walked toward her. "Stupid. He must be in trouble now and you don't want to help him. Would you rather save that freak gangsters than your father?" Yao Yuer began to shake, struggling to respond. Ibi pointed a finger at her, asserting, "I didn't ask for your opinion. I could just kill you and leave, but I want to help you because you saved my life. So we're going to search for your father. That's how I repay my debt." He shouted for her to shut up and get ready quickly. Yao Yuer screamed and dashed up the stairs, almost tripping. Ibi rubbed his temples, feeling exhausted. "What a nightmare," he muttered. A crowd of zombies gathered in the city street, drawn by a noise as a car sped toward them, knocking them down without slowing. Meanwhile, in the grocery store, Ibi was packing a bag of groceries. He glanced at Yao Yuer and asked what she was hiding and if she was ready. The girl emerged from behind a wall, dressed in a blue sundress with a backpack slung over her shoulder. Ibi frowned, saying she looked too dressed up for their mission, as if they were going to a picnic. She stayed silent. He asked if she had prepared the noodles, and she nodded. As he ate breakfast, Yao Yuer sat quietly. Ibi thought it best to wait until the sun was high in the sky before rushing out to kill the zombies at their door. He remembered there were many cars on the road in good condition and hoped to find one he could start. He planned to return for her, hoping she wouldn't cause any trouble. While Yao Yuer snacked, he asked if she had any sharp sticks to share. Just as she handed him the package, a car barreled into the store at high speed, sending shelves crashing. Ibi instinctively shielded the girl with his body and exclaimed in surprise, "Is it an earthquake?" Turning around, he realized an SUV had crashed through the roller door. The driver, a man in military uniform, stepped out with a smile. "What a great store! Looks like I found a treasure," he said, kicking the remains of the zombies. "Good zombies are dead zombies, even if they are already the walking dead." He raised his hand and declared he would take everything from the store. The man stepped inside, laughing with delight as he spotted a shelf of chips and bear cakes, his favorites. He began stuffing them into a bag, commenting that most supermarkets in the city were likely looted, so he planned to hit more remote areas next. Suddenly, a knife was pressed to his neck as Ibi warned him that any sudden move would mean death. "Better drop what you've taken," Ibi said, "unless you want to become zombie food." The man started sweating, panicking as he quickly threw the snacks at Ibi. Unexpectedly, the man stood up, grabbed the bag of loot, and rushed outside. Ibi chased after him, pointing the knife and shouting that the thief would die. The man screamed, begging for mercy and surrendering by raising his hands. Just then, Yao Yuer cried out for Ibi to stop killing people. The guy turned around to see Yao Yuer standing there, hesitating as she said that the store was damaged because of the stranger. "If you kill him, there will be no one to pay for the damage," she pointed out. Ibi remained silent, still holding the knife to the man's neck. The man, attempting to smile, agreed with the girl. Ibi then turned to him and declared that he had a good car, which now belonged to them as payment for the store. "You'll be our driver," he said. The man, trembling in fear, complied. Ibi asked Yao Yuer to help load supplies into the car. She looked at him questioningly, while the man awkwardly begged for forgiveness, explaining he only drove into the store because he was hungry and hadn't known anyone was there. As Yao Yuer struggled with a large bag of supplies, she spotted a crowd of zombies, approaching and shouted a warning. The man, annoyed, mentioned that he had just crushed a bunch of them. Ibi ordered everyone to get into the car, and once they were inside, the man started the SUV, reminding them to fasten their seatbelts. The car quickly sped off, crashing through zombies in its path, while Ibi and Yao Yu Air braced themselves in the cabin, shaken. The man pressed the gas pedal harder, laughing as he continued to mow down the undead. While laughing like a villain of a flop film, Ibi shouted, demanding to know what was wrong with the man. "Did you decide to kill them all?" he threatened, pointing his knife at the driver. The man, scared, stammered that he needed to clear the zombies before leaving. Besides, he pointed out, Ibi hadn't specified their destination yet. Turning to Yao Yu Air, Ibi asked where her father might be. She replied that he had mentioned the Eastern Market during their last phone call. The man winced at the mention of the market, noting it was always crowded and likely overrun with zombies. Ibi frowned and told the man to stop whining. If they were going there, they were going there. The driver nervously agreed, and they sped through the city streets. The stranger asked if he could turn on the music since the ride was painfully boring. Ibi, displeased, snapped that he shouldn't make noise. In response, the man cheerfully declared he'd just sing instead, claiming he was good at it. Ibi threatened to shut him up, while Yao Yuer giggled at the exchange. Zombie suddenly stepped in front of the SUV, and the man effortlessly ran it over. He continued humming and munching on a lollipop, seemingly enjoying himself as he knocked down another zombie. Ibi glanced at him, irritated. "Could you calm down for a minute? Let me sleep, or do you want us all dead?" The man hesitated, then replied that Ibi had forbidden him to turn on the music, so he had to entertain himself. "Don't worry," he assured. "This machine is tough. Zombies are just bugs to us." Ibi, losing patience, grabbed the knife and shouted that he wanted the man to stop singing, not the car. The man glanced at the fuel gauge and nervously admitted that the car was out of gas. Ibi exploded in anger, shouting that they had driven halfway and the man was just now thinking about fuel. The man sheepishly explained he had forgotten, and unfortunately, there were no gas stations nearby. Ibi grabbed the man, insisting he needed to get out of the car to distract the zombies. The man, sweating and panicking, pleaded for something to eat so he could at least die full. Just then, Yao Yuer screamed in fear as a zombie appeared outside their window, mouth agape and ready to attack. Ibi, displeased, warned that they could die here if they didn't act fast. He spotted a machete next to the seat, kicked the door open, and jumped out. A zombie lunged at him, but he quickly drew his knife and decapitated it, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. Another zombie approached from behind, and Ibi stabbed it in the head, pushing the body away with his foot. Two more zombies rushed him from the side. He deftly pushed one away and struck the other in the head with a brutal blow, crushing its skull. The man in the car watched in shock at Ibi's skills, exclaiming that it was impressive. Yao Yu Air was equally surprised. Ibi approached the man and urged him to get out, but the man refused, saying he was too scared. Ibi grabbed him firmly, reminding him that sitting in the car wouldn't save him. Eventually, the man reluctantly agreed, recalling that there were several parked cars along the road. If they were lucky, some might still have fuel. Ibi assured the man that he would clear the way and protect him from zombies while he drained the gasoline. He asked if the man knew how to do that, considering they had talked about cars on the way. The man nervously replied that he did. Ibi then ordered Yao Yu Air to stay put, and she agreed. The man got out of the car but hesitated, saying he wasn't mentally prepared for this. Ibi impatiently told him to prepare a few bottles, to which the man responded that they still had soda left. Ibi, annoyed, insisted he just needed to pour it out, and then began to take down the approaching zombies. The man observed Ibi's proficiency in dealing with the monsters and realized he should have felt intimidated back at the store. He called out to Ibi, who asked why he was still standing by the car. The man remembered that the car had a spare fuel tank and hesitated, thinking he needed to make the best of this unusual situation. After Ibi dispatched the last zombie, he turned with an annoyed expression and asked the man what he had said. The man timidly explained that he simply forgot due to the shock and that there was no need to scare him further. Ibi, still fuming, told him to hurry up. The man waved his hand and awkwardly said he would do everything now. Ibi then decided it would be better for the man to collect something for him first. He held out his hand, showing the energy black gold, and explained that these black beads were hidden in the brains of zombies. He needed the man's help to extract them. The man was surprised when Eb demonstrated by piercing a zombie's head and extracting a small black ball from inside. He grimaced at the sight, saying it was disgusting and that he would rather stay in the car. Eb pointed the machete at him and insisted he didn't need to cut the flesh, he just had to extract the beads. When the man asked how he would do that without the machete, Eb shouted for him to use his mouth. He warned that if the man shirked, the next person he would kill would be him. Eb moved on to deal with the other zombies that had approached, leaving the man feeling awkward and silent. He muttered that zombies were disgusting and extracting things from their brains made him feel sick. He took a small iron spatula from the car, remarked that even though it was full, zombies could easily bite through it, so he needed to be careful. Eb told him he was talking too much. The man timidly extended the spatula toward a zombie's head, wondering if they were supposed to stay still. Impressed by Eb's parses, his precise cuts, he plunged the spatula into the monster's skull, marveling at how fragile it was. He extracted the shiny green bead and thought about how it resembled a pearl in a shell, asking Eb if it was worth a lot of money. Eb told him to focus on his task instead of chatting. The man examined the bead, considering whether to keep one for himself, contemplating that this was what turned people into zombies. Eb dispatched another monster and wiped the sweat from his forehead, noting that the remaining zombies were too far away to pose a threat. Feeling slightly more accustomed to his previous body, Eb realized he needed to improve his speed. He turned to the man and asked how many beads he had collected. The man proudly displayed his haul, claiming it was a great harvest and that he was starting to get used to this new line of work. Eb wiped his machete clean and instructed the man to wash all the beads and store them safely. With that done, they could continue on their journey. Eb leaned over Yao Yu, concern etching across his face as he touched her burning forehead. "Damn it," he muttered, noticing her fever had worsened. Desperate, he searched through her backpack, hoping she'd packed her medicine. He found water and carefully gave her some to drink. Just then, Xian, the man from the car, walked up behind him and asked, "What's wrong with your sister? Is it heat stroke?" "Mind your own business," Eb snapped, glaring. "Just fill the tank and get ready to drive." As Yao Yu's condition seemed to improve slightly, Xian tried again. "She's been in the car for a long time. Is she feeling better?" Eb's anger flared. He grabbed his knife, shouting, "If anything happens to her because you lied about the fuel, I'll carve you into 1,000 pieces." Terrified, Xian promised to drive well and not make any more mistakes. After a few tense moments, Yao Yu stirred and slowly opened her eyes. They were finally back on the road. As they moved forward, Xian commented on Eb's skill with the machete and asked for his name. Eb, still on edge, responded, "If you want to know my name, introduce yourself first." Xian explained nervously, "I'm Xian, manager of a local auto repair shop. Everything went bad so quickly. I had no choice but to save myself. My friend left the car at the shop, but he never returned, so now it's mine." Before Eb could finish introducing himself, Xian slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop sent Eb flying into the front seat. Furious, he yelled, "Are you trying to kill us?" Xian stared ahead, horror in his eyes. "The road to the market, it's blocked. Flames engulfed the cars ahead of them, creating an impassable barrier." Eb gritted his teeth and glanced at Yao Yu. "The road to the eastern market is blocked. We might not be able to get to your father," he said, his voice tight. Yao Yu finally woke up, looking groggy as she peered out the window. In front of them, cars were covered in flames, blocking their way. Eb turned to her, addressing her awakening, and spoke grimly. "The road to the eastern market is blocked. We might not be able to reach your father." Yao Yu stared at the fire, her thoughts drifting to her dad. Shane then suggested they could take a bypass road, though it would take a bit longer. He asked if they should proceed, and after considering it, Eb agreed. But first, he insisted they needed better equipment. He asked Xian if he knew of any electrical goods or weapons stores nearby. After a moment's thought, Xian nodded and said he knew of one, promising to take them there. As the car resumed moving, Xian spoke up. "In the south of the city, there's an old man who owns a forge. He's been at it for more than 10 years, so he has a lot of experience." Eb took note of the forge's presence. Xian continued, "The old man almost never leaves the place. But now that the zombie virus has broken out, I can't say for sure if he's still there. You know how they say a monk can't just leave his temple. And besides, he's got a lot of useful stuff in there. He couldn't just abandon it all. Jian added that the old man had personally forged the machete now in Ibi's hand. Ibi thought about it, realizing he had collected enough pearls to create a weapon, if, of course, the forge had the right equipment. He only hoped Xian wasn't joking about this. Xian continued, reminiscing about how long it had been since he'd last seen the blacksmith. They had gotten along well back in the day, such nostalgia. As kids, they often skipped classes together and even stole melons. Suddenly, Yao Yu put a finger to her lips, indicating that Ibi had fallen asleep. Xian exclaimed in disbelief, "How could the guy fall asleep during my fiery speech?" They continued driving and eventually arrived at their destination. Xian looked around, commenting, "This place hasn't changed much in the last 10 years. Ibi glanced at the pile of metal and asked skeptically, "Is this really a forge? It looks more like a garbage dump." Xian smiled, explaining that the old man liked to collect all sorts of rubbish. Ibi, however, was not in a mood for jokes. He pointed the machete at Xian, saying, "You better pray that the local blacksmith is alive, or you'll be digging your own grave." Suddenly, a few zombies appeared nearby. Xian said that before they could enter, they'd apparently need to tidy up a little first. As a crowd of zombies approached, Ibi glanced at Xian and asked sarcastically, "Maybe one of them is your blacksmith?" Xian hesitated, while Ibi waved dismissively, saying, "As always, I'll kill the monsters, and you get the pearls." Xian nodded. A voice called out from behind, asking them to wait. It was Yao Yu. She insisted that she could help, stepping out of the car. Ibi immediately refused, telling her to stay put and not get in the way. He made it clear that he wasn't going to save her if something went wrong. What if she suddenly lost consciousness or got bitten by a zombie? Yao Yu replied that she was fine and promised to be very careful. Xian chimed in, calling her a brave girl, and assured her that she could collect the pearls while he kept an eye on her for safety. Ibi frowned and added bluntly, "If you get bitten, I won't hesitate to stab you." Yao Yu nodded, agreeing to the condition without hesitation. With that, Ibi began to kill the zombies, dealing with them one by one. While he was occupied, Xian asked Yao Yu how old she was. She replied that she was 14. Curious, Xian then asked her name and she introduced herself. He took an interest and questioned why she and her brother had different surnames, asking if her brother was her cousin. Yao Yu remained silent. From a nearby building, someone was watching them through binoculars. A man holding a cigarette cursed under his breath. Just then, a guy entered the room and addressed the man, calling him Comrade Luo. He mentioned that he had a message, but before he could say anything further, a bullet pierced his head. Comrade Luo, holding a gun, looked displeased and muttered about how many times he had told people to knock before entering. Another guy, who had been waiting behind the door, began trembling as he saw the corpse. Turning to the new arrival, Comrade Luo asked, "What's going on out there?" Trembling, the guy reported that someone had come to the forge and started killing zombies in the area. The man replied that he already knew that. "What else?" he demanded. The guy hesitated before adding that he recognized one of them. He had seen him before in the northern part of the city, where he had killed many zombies single-handedly. It was quite impressive. Comrade Luo took a drag on his cigarette, pondering this information. He then turned to a girl standing next to him and instructed her to bring something. She brought a tray with a packet of noodles and handed it to him. He took the noodles and tossed them to the guy, adding that this was his reward and that he would tell him more about the guy later. The man thanked Comrade Luo, and said to him, "Tell me the details later." Lu grabbed the girl by the head, giggling sinisterly, clearly signaling his intentions. The girl appeared utterly helpless as she was forced to her knees in front of Luo, compelled to engage in something deeply degrading while Luo continued to watch the scene unfolding outside the window, deriving pleasure from both the view and the power he exerted over her. At this moment, Ibi killed the last zombie. He asked Yao Yu how she had managed to PDF search through the corpses, and Jian replied that it was quite simple. The girl proudly stated that she had gathered 19 pearls. Ibi then instructed Jian to look around the outside of the house while he checked inside. Kicking the door open, Ibi found the interior dark. Near the entrance lay some firewood, an apron, and a pair of glasses. Noticing an anvil nearby, he remarked, "The stove is still burning. The owner was either eaten not long ago or he left shortly before we got here." Xian soon returned, reporting that there was nothing suspicious outside and that he had no idea where the old man could have gone. Ibi demanded the pearls they had collected and instructed Xian to look for scrap metal outside, telling him to bring everything there. He handed Xian a machete, telling him to be ready to fend off attacks. Xian then asked what Ibi planned to do, since they had come for weapons, and there seemed to be plenty here. Ibi replied that by next week, all of this would be useless, and they needed more powerful weapons. Xian eyed Ibi and questioned if he was actually going to forge iron. Ibi shouted at him not to talk so much and to quickly hand over the pearls. Xian rushed out and met Yao Yu, commenting, "What an irritable guy." Yao Yu asked what she should do, but by that time, Ibi had already put on the glasses, apron, and gloves and was lighting a fire in the stove. His first skill as a mechanic was now coming into play. He was ready to forge. Using tongs, he took a piece of iron and began hammering it on the anvil. Xian returned, approaching from behind, and asked if Ibi actually knew how to forge. Ibi ordered him to pour all the pearls into a metal container. Xian complied, pouring out the beads. Ibi placed them over the fire, and after a few minutes, they melted into a green liquid. Xian was amazed, exclaiming, "It dissolves due to temperature? What an incredible effect!" Ibi then took out a utility knife, cutting his hand to let some of his blood drip into a cup of the green liquid. He poured the mixture over the blade he had forged. Xian observed closely, comparing it to adding seasoning. Ibi continued hammering the blade of the soon-to-be weapon, and the rhythmic knocking sound echoed throughout the entire area. At this time, several unknown men were standing on the stairs discussing their plan. One of them mentioned how Ibi cut zombies like watermelons and wondered why. Comrade Luo ordered them to bring his head. The man behind replied that if they managed to take him down, they would receive a lot of supplies. A third man added enthusiastically that it would also be possible to spend a sweet night with Yao Yu, wondering aloud what could be better. The shaved man added that there must be a reason why Comrade Luo placed such importance on Ibi. With all the zombies in the area already dealt with, the task would be easy. They planned to wait until nightfall to launch their attack. The others agreed that this was a great idea. Meanwhile, Ibi was forging metal, with Xian standing behind, wondering what Ibi's true specialty was. "Did you really graduate from technical school?" Xian asked himself. Ibi picked up the resulting blade, and Xian excitedly added, "The texture of the blade is like lightning. It's so cool." Ibi smiled and said that it was finally ready. It was time to show what a mechanic could do. While this was happening, Yao Yu finished setting up lunch, wiping the sweat from her brow. She was glad that the oven still worked, allowing them to enjoy a nice snack after all their hard work. Suddenly, someone approached from behind and covered her mouth. One of the men sent to capture Ibi told her to be quiet, saying he would take her to a wonderful place. Ibi seemed to sense something was wrong, but continued his task of finishing the weapon. After sharpening the blade and inserting it into the handle, the zombie-killing sword was ready. Xian looked on, amazed, saying that he had only ever seen this kind of thing in movies. Ibi stood there holding electric pliers, announcing that the final step was activation. He pressed the pliers to the blade, and sparks flew as the sword began to glow green. The generator switched off from the high power load, stunning Xian. Ibi held up his creation, announcing, "The forged sword of the second stage is ready." Xian was amazed, expressing his desire for one. Suddenly they heard screams, Yao Yu's screams. They immediately rushed out of the forge, finding 4 men standing on the street, armed, with one of them carrying an unconscious Yao Yu on his shoulder. Ibi was furious. The shaven-headed man pointed a knife at Yao Yu and demanded that Ibi and Xian throw down their weapons and come with them to the boss, threatening that Yao Yu would die otherwise. Ibi raised the sword with both hands and slammed it into the ground with all his strength, and a bright green beam of light emanated from it. The villains were surprised as the beam caught one of them, cutting him in half. The man carrying Yao Yu started running, shouting in panic, "What is this?" Ibi made another swing, and the green beam cut the metal pipe in the hands of another villain. One of the men shouted after the kidnapper, asking why he was running. The kidnapper replied, "Idiot! What else can we do in this situation?" At that moment, Eb blew off the head of another villain, and the kidnappers were terrified. One of them blamed the other, saying it was his fault for deviating from the plan and attacking the first girl he saw. He insisted they needed to let her go, or else no one would be saved. The man carrying Yao Yu responded that if he put her down, the beam would overtake them, and if they failed their mission, they would all die at the hands of their boss. Suddenly, a bright beam landed near them. Eb was approaching, full of anger. Xian called out, reporting that zombies were approaching from behind. Indeed, a horde of monsters was rushing toward them, the man remarking that they must have been lured by something like honey. Xian asked Eb what they should do, whether they should run. Eb gripped the hilt of his sword, swung it, and the green beam instantly killed several zombies. Xian was stunned as he watched the battle unfold, an uneven fight, unlike anything he had seen before. He then realized the villains were running away with Yao Yu and urgently shouted that they needed to give chase. Eb angrily retorted, telling Xian not to be foolish, and ordered him to catch up with them while I deal with the zombies, and don't be a fool chasing them on feet, take the car. Xian quickly jumped behind the wheel, determined. I'll catch them like in the old days, he thought, urging himself to hang in there. Eb trusted Xian to save the princess, focusing on clearing the way. The villains, now terrified, realized they were being pursued and jumped into a bus parked near a house to escape. Xian suddenly braked and observed the building. Is this their lair? He muttered as dusk settled in. He got out of the car, noticing that they had blocked the entrance with the bus, and wondered what to do next. As the villains exited the bus, two others, who were also with them, laughed evilly. One mocked that only one person had come, while his partner replied that it was the perfect opportunity to deal with him. The man with the knife taunted Xian, mentioning that Xian's car was in good shape and they should thank him for bringing it. He continued, saying that if Xian didn't want to end up as a kebab, he should undress and leave. But Xian wasn't intimidated, bravely standing just like a chicken. He pulled out his machete and declared that he wasn't afraid of their threats because he wasn't weak while his hand was shaking with the fear. The villains rushed toward him, one laughing as he boasted that he had killed more people than he had eaten chickens in his life. Xian swung his machete, boldly replying that they were the ones seeking death. Just as he was about to engage them, a bright green beam shot through, cutting through the enemies and the bus instantly. Seeing Eb approaching, Xian asked if he had already dealt with all the zombies. Eb replied that Xian shouldn't just stand there like a statue. They were going to rescue Yao Yu, and he should follow. Xian nodded in agreement, while Eb focused and struck the bus, creating a bright green explosion. They then entered the building's territory, where the remaining enemies were already hiding. One of the men hurled a knife at Eb, but before it could reach him, the blade of Eb's sword intercepted it effortlessly. He retaliated, and the green beam from his sword quickly struck down the attacker. Xian, watching, asked if Eb needed any help, to which Eb confidently pressed on alone. Two other villains started throwing petrol bombs, but Eb calmly swung his sword in their direction, striking them down instantly with a powerful blow. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. A bullet narrowly missed Eb's head. On a balcony above, a man was watching, impressed. He spoke out, praising Eb's remarkable skill, and added that he had seen everything, considering it a natural disaster. The man invited Eb to come up and have a drink with him, calling his skills impressive. Eb glanced up at the man, his eyes filled with menace. The man continued, expressing his respect for someone as talented as Eb. He offered to meet any requests Eb had. However, before Eb could respond, the man aimed a gun at Yao Yu's head, cautioning Eb not to act rashly. He mocked how they had treated Yao Yu well, mentioning she was now resting soundly. He continued to imply that there was no reason for Eb to doubt their hospitality, and noted that while Eb's weapon was powerful enough to wipe them all out, it was now a matter of speed, his sword versus the gun. Xian, standing nearby, whispered anxiously, wondering what they should do since Yao Yu was being held hostage, and the villain had a gun. Eb smirked and spoke up, saying that he was working on a big project and was concerned that there wouldn't be enough people to help. If the man were to gather all his people and let him take care of them, then Eb would go up to him. The villain laughed and spread his arms wide, noting Eb's boldness. He assured Eb that they would welcome him in the most solemn manner. Shan, bewildered, turned to Ibi and asked if he had gone crazy. They would have to face all of them at once, and the villains had guns. Ibi looked at Xian and remarked that if he wasn't interested, he didn't have to come along. Xian protested, asking if Ibi was really saying that now. Despite his hesitation, Xian finally agreed to follow, albeit reluctantly. The villain's minions bowed and led Ibi inside the building. Shortly afterward, Ibi found himself standing in front of a crowd of armed bandits. The man from earlier greeted him and asked if there were enough people here. All the young and strong individuals within a 15-kilometer radius had gathered. He introduced himself as their leader, Luo, and asked Ibi for his name and what he wanted from them. Ibi responded, introducing himself and recognizing Luo. He then asked if Luo knew how the zombie disaster began. Luo, intrigued, asked if Ibi was claiming to know him and suggesting he knew the cause of the outbreak. Ibi confidently replied that he did indeed know about the spread of the virus and had prepared in advance by stocking up on supplies. Now he believed that Luo was trying to form a gang of shadow dragons, right? Luo was impressed and admitted that he had only told a few about the shadow dragons. He asked how Ibi knew of them, acknowledging that Ibi was becoming more interesting. Ibi then showed him a pearl, asking if it was even more interesting now. Luo laughed and confirmed Ibi's guess, but insisted they skip the idle talk. Instead, he asked Ibi to share what he knew. Ibi grinned and explained that there were several theories regarding the spread of the zombie virus. The first suggested that the virus originated from a failure in foreign bacteria research and spread globally through migratory birds and insects. The second version proposed that it was a biological weapon, a convenient means of waging war that allowed enemies to self-destruct, although the situation had gotten out of control. The third theory was even more absurd, an extraterrestrial origin. A meteorite carrying the zombie virus had supposedly fallen to Earth, disintegrated in the atmosphere, and scattered particles that penetrated human bodies, turning them into carriers of the virus. Ibi asked Luo if he had heard any of these theories before, mentioning that Luo had returned from the city to the countryside to form his gang. Luo confirmed that he knew a bit about the virus and had a secret of his own to share. He then produced 2 pearls and said that, despite much thought, he still didn't fully understand how the pearls found in zombies' skulls could be used. He asked Ibi if the sword and his major project were related to these pearls, and if Ibi could share more about their purpose. Ibi replied that he first needed to prepare some materials. Luo said that wouldn't be an issue, but first, he wanted to see the sword. He reminded Ibi that Yao Yu was still with them, and they didn't want anything to happen to her. Ibi frowned, but handed the sword to one of Luo's strongmen, who struggled to hold it, and told Luo that it was incredibly heavy. Luo was amused and remarked that today was full of surprises, urging Ibi to begin his demonstration. Ibi responded that the day of judgment had arrived precisely because of the zombie virus outbreak. People immediately became infected, and this black pearl formed in their brain. These pearls are called energy black gold, and over time it accumulates energy in the dead body. Energetic black gold adapts well to flesh and metal, and can be used to create powerful weapons. Luo said that the guy mentioned black gold adapts to flesh and metal. Could it be possible to make some kind of elixir of immortality from it? Ibi chuckled and said that some tried to eat it, but most turned into zombies. Luo asked, "Most? What happened to the others? He'd like to see them." The guy suggested taking a look, but he would only show it once. Step 1 activation. Ibi took 2 metal rods and leaned them against the funnel. Green flashes of current surrounded the guy, and the generators broke down due to the load on the power grid, causing the lights to go out. Everyone started making noise, asking what had happened. Had the electricity gone out? Luo asked, "Did this energy gold cause an electromagnetic pulse? Is that possible?" Ibi grabbed the sword and struck at the man, but he managed to dodge. He shouted, "Idiot! Is he kidding him?" Luo fired his pistol twice, but Ibi quickly reacted and dodged the bullets. The guy grabbed the sword more firmly and quickly cut down the enemy. The wounded man said that he was careless. The leader of the gang of shadow dragons had come to an end. When he learned about the uses of black gold, he forced the shadow dragons to help him in the research and development of various weapons from this material, and subsequently began to dominate this topic. Even without considering the state army, Within the limits of his power, there was only violence, slavery, and murder. None of this was left aside. Ibi said before they succeed, he must completely destroy then, every single one of them. The guy killed all the gang members. There were explosions of energy. Ibi looked at Yao Yu and thought that he had probably already become a butcher, but he couldn't let her witness everything that would happen. The guy put his hand to the sleeping girl's face and thought how he wanted her to realize the cruelty of the apocalypse, but did not want her to be drawn into it. Then the door opened slightly, and Ibi pulled out his sword, preparing to attack. Xian walked through the door and asked, looking at the pile of corpses, "Is the guy done here?" The guy raised Luo's pistol and replied that he had fulfilled the purpose for which he came here. Xian asked, "Did they really do all this for the gun?" He thought that they had come here to save the girl, and he was even moved. Ibi put the pistol in his belt and said, "Small arms are extremely rare in this area, and there are many opportunities to improve it." Xian asked what this gun could be transformed into. Maybe the guy would make it electromagnetic or laser. Ibi remained silent. Xian continued to talk, saying, "By the way, pretending that he allowed him to leave and putting pearls in the generator was a brilliant idea." Xian didn't expect that one such small bead could blow up an entire generator. It was cool. Suddenly, one of the dead began to stir. Ibi immediately took out his gun. Luo's girl covered her head with her hands and screamed not to be killed. Xian asked what did such a sweet girl forget in this place. She answered, trembling, that she was caught and brought here by Luo. Every day, he used her like some kind of slave, humiliated, and tortured her. She asked for her life to be spared. Ibi asked if she knew where the supply warehouse was. The girl said she would take them there. Xian asked where she came from. The girl answered her house was in the western region of Annie. The man asked if her family was there. She replied that there was only a sister, but she disappeared when the disaster happened. They suddenly stopped at a non-working elevator. Xian said that the elevator was de-energized, and it would not be possible to use it. The girl said, "But the storage room is on the 6th floor." Ibi asked the man to take Yao Yu and find a room while he and the girl went up the stairs. At this time, in the hall, one of Luo's henchmen woke up. He could not crawl out from under the corpse of his comrade and asked for help. He saw the dead boss. Suddenly, the guy noticed a pearl lying on the floor. He took it and said, "This is energetic black gold." The memory of Ibi and his boss's conversation was in his mind. The guy cringed and swallowed it. Pain pierced his whole body, and he screamed heart-rendingly. A thunderstorm began. Xian looked out the window. Inside, Yao Yu opened her eyes, sat up on the bed, and asked, "Xian?" The man walked up to the bed and waved to the girl, asking if she had woken up yet. Yao asked where they were. The man explained that she was kidnapped by bandits and dragged here, but his friend Ibi beat everyone up. The girl asked in fear, "Bandits? Is Buddy Ibi okay?" The door opened, and the guy walked in. He noticed that Yao Yu had woken up. She happily asked him if he was okay. Xian asked if he found any useful things upstairs. Ibi replied that there was a lot of useful stuff there, but he couldn't take it all alone. They'd look tomorrow. Xian asked what happened to the girl who took him to the storeroom. The guy replied that he didn't know, maybe she ran away while he was searching the room. The man kept asking, "Did she really run away?" But there's a thunderstorm outside. Ibi lay down on the bed and said he didn't care what happened to her. He was tired. Let them get some sleep first and then return to this issue. The young man asked Jiayan to go downstairs and block the door so that the zombies could not get through. The man exclaimed, "He should do this again?" Yao Yu said, "Let Ibi rest and she will help him." Xian responded touchingly, "How caring she is." He was so touched. The thunderstorm did not stop. It kept raining heavily. At the same time, in the apartment, Li Ruoxi was taking a shower when suddenly the door opened and an unknown man asked if she had finished. The girl responded in fear, asking what he was doing and telling him to get out of there. The man replied that this was his house. How could she drive him away? He only asked if she had finished taking a shower so that they could finally move on to the next activity. She angrily questioned him, asking what his goal was. The young man laughed and asked, "Why not?" Who else could shelter a woman who had been wandering the streets for several days? He was glad to see she hadn't mutated during that time. He generously let her into his home, but free cheese only comes in a mousetrap, right? The man tried to open the shower door, saying it seemed she had nothing more to offer him except her body come on. Together they could survive this apocalypse. Lai Ruoxi screamed for help, but the man responded that there was a thunderstorm outside and no one would hear her screams. Only if she didn't hope to be saved from zombies. Suddenly, they heard a roar. The guy ran out of the shower with a knife in his hand, cursing. For a moment, she turned pale, afraid of something. The girl heard his screams, and she asked what was happening, carefully looking out from behind the wall. Her eyes opened wide as the huge monster pinned the man to the wall, impaling him with its arm. The monster hurled the lifeless body with such force that it slammed into the wall beside Li Ruoxi, causing her to scream in terror. Her wide eyes fixated on the grotesque figure before her, its appearance more horrifying than anything she had ever seen. You're a monster!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with both shock and disbelief. The creature, panting heavily, collapsed to the floor. I'm not a monster," he gasped, his voice full of confusion and despair. He pounded the floor with his fists in frustration. Why did I change so much?" Li Ruoxi, still stunned, cautiously asked, "What are you?" The monster looked up at her with pain-filled eyes. "I was shot. I was dying. And in desperation, I ate energy black gold." He paused, his voice weak, as if he were struggling to understand what had happened to him. "Afterward, it was like I turned inside out, like everything in me shifted and twisted." Her expression softened from fear to curiosity. "So, you were human once? And eating black gold did this to you?" The monster nodded, his monstrous features contorting as he recalled the fateful decision. "Yes, that's what the guy EB, I think he called himself. I remembered his and my boss's conversation. I thought it would save me. I had nothing left to lose." Li Ruoxi's eyes narrowed. "EB?" she repeated, her mind racing. Grabbing the creature by the hair, she yanked his head up and bombarded him with questions. "Do you know him? Where is he now? Tell me everything." The creature groaned, overwhelmed by her intensity, but managed to reply. "He arrived in Shinan recently. He has some strange energy. He cut down everyone in the building. He shouldn't be far, but he's too strong. You can't defeat him." Li Ruoxi's eyes burned with hatred as she clenched her teeth. "It's because of him that I'm out here wandering, hiding, struggling. I hate him more than anything." She eyed the monster's large frame and strength, a dangerous thought crossing her mind. "But you're strong too," she mused. "You just killed someone in a second. You have power. Help me deal with him." The creature looked at his hands, confusion and fear still clouding his thoughts. "I don't know how I did it. There's something inside me, but I can't control it." Lai Ruoxi's lips curled into a sly smile. "That doesn't matter," she said, moving closer. "All I need is your help. In return, I'll give you whatever you want." The creature hesitated, but the offer was too tempting. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice trembling with hope. "Yes," she whispered. "I promise." With a roar of approval, the monster lifted her in his arms, his excitement palpable. "I like you," he shouted. "I'll help you kill him." But before they could move, the creature let out a blood-curdling scream, clutching his head in agony once more. Li Ruoxi stepped back, her confidence faltering as she watched the monster's body convulse uncontrollably. The rain had finally stopped, and the group prepared to leave the mansion. EB slipped on his gloves, fastening his holster with a quick, practiced motion. Nearby, Xian was rummaging through a pile of boxes, muttering under his breath. "Thought we'd find something more useful in here. Turns out it's just instant noodles, canned food, crackers, and he picked up a few stray items, a bunch of cigarettes and wine." EB, now with his sword secured on his back, gave a brief nod. "Let's wrap this up." They headed downstairs, their arms full of supplies. Xian grumbled as they descended. "I was sure all those guys had pistols. Who would have guessed only their boss Luo Yang was armed?" He then brightened up slightly. "At least we've got enough supplies now should last us about a month." Suddenly, Xian's voice rose in alarm. "What the hell happened to my car?" He stared in disbelief at the wreckage in front of them. The vehicle, which had been pristine when they'd arrived, was now dented and bashed in. Was there hail last night? A meteor shower? What the hell? He crouched down, inspecting the damage more closely. This must be the aftermath of the fight, he muttered, piecing things together. It was raining, but this... Without warning, Ibi stepped forward, his expression calm. Move back from the car. Drawing his sword, he swung it with precision, slicing through the roof as if it were butter. With a single motion, he peeled the metal back and tossed it aside. Jian let out a surprised laugh. Well, looks like we've got ourselves a convertible now. He hopped into the driver's seat and, after a tense moment, sighed in relief. Engine's still good. Where to next? Should we start searching for Yao Yu's father? Ibi gave a firm nod. Yeah, let's go. As they sped off, Xian chuckled, his mood lightened. Driving a convertible is kinda cool, but we gotta be careful, can't just plow through zombies with this thing anymore. Suddenly, his laughter stopped, his eyes widening in shock. What the look? A horde of zombies emerged in the distance, moving rapidly in their direction. But what grabbed their attention even more were the schoolchildren running ahead of them, their terrified screams filling the air as they pleaded for help. Jian tightened his grip on the wheel. We've got a serious problem. Ibi recognized them as his classmates and was surprised that they were still alive and still very energetic. One of the girls tripped and fell, saying she couldn't walk any further as the zombies drew closer. Suddenly, a green beam cut through the horde of monsters. It was Ibi's sword attack. The group looked around in shock, unable to believe their eyes when they saw their classmate. He approached, greeted them, and said, "It's been a long time." The schoolchildren sighed in relief. One of the girls thanked him, and the blonde guy commented on how powerful Ibi's sword was, asking where he had found it. Ibi replied that he had traveled south of the city. Then, he asked if they had finally decided to leave the school and where they were planning to go. One of his classmates explained that after they left school, they had heard about an island in the center of the lake where survivors had set up a camp. Now they wanted to reach it. But the journey was tough, and some of them had already been bitten by zombies. Another guy noticed Ibi's car and exclaimed that it was perfect for giving them a lift. The girl with the bob haircut pleaded for food, saying they hadn't eaten since the day before and would be grateful if he could share even a little. Yao Yu sat in the car and discussed the situation with Jian. It seemed like Ibi's classmates were in trouble. Jian noted that the kids were eyeing his car as if it were a lifeline. Even in this state, it still looks beautiful, Jian joked. Ibi, however, shouted for everyone to stop asking for help. There were too many of them, and there wasn't enough gas in the car. He said they would share food, but the school children needed to help with some tasks first. They quickly agreed. Ibi called out to Xian, asking him to explain what they needed to do. Xian stood up and declared, "This is my finest hour." Ibi added that he would handle the zombies while the others cleaned up. The teenagers, confused, asked what they were supposed to clean. Xian pulled out a small spatula and said, "Watch and learn." He pierced the head of one of the zombies, extracted a pearl-like object, and told them they needed to pull out things like that. The group paled, and one of the girls fainted. Holding the bead, Yao Yu told them not to be afraid, assuring them that zombie skulls were fragile and getting the pearls wasn't difficult. The blonde guy looked at the little girl and thought sympathetically, "Poor thing, what has she been through?" Xian handed out makeshift tools to the school children, reminding them to be careful and avoid getting bitten by the zombies. One of the guys wondered aloud why Ibi needed these strange items, asking if monsters really had pearls in their brains. Everyone got to work, and after 2 hours, Jian boasted about filling a whole bag with energy-rich black gold. He turned to the group saying, "These are just monsters." Ibi asked for the food to be distributed as they had agreed, but one of the men exclaimed, questioning why Ibi had decided to give away their food without asking for their input. The school children stared at Xian, hoping for approval. He sighed inwardly, thinking how much this pained him. How could he share food when he could eat it himself? Suddenly, a massive monster came crashing down from the sky, landing right on the car. Everyone froze, looking up in shock as the creature let out a deafening roar. Ibi quickly identified it as an anomalous mutation, shocked that such a beast could appear here. He yelled for everyone to run as the monster lunged at him. Ibi dodged the attack skillfully, drawing his sword and taking a swing, but unfortunately, it didn't connect with the creature. He quickly leapt back to regroup. Just then, Roxy emerged from the shadows, clapping her hands and smiling triumphantly. "Finally, I've found you, Ibi," she said with satisfaction. Ibi was caught off guard by her appearance. His classmates, equally stunned, asked in disbelief how she had survived. Roxy, however, had only one thing on her mind. "I have one goal, to watch you die," she said, pointing her finger at Ibi and ordering the creature to finish him off. Ibi gritted his teeth, realizing just how unpleasant this woman was, and now she had this monstrous ally. The monster lunged toward Ibi, who swiftly drew his sword and braced for impact. Yao Yu and Xian stood frozen in fear, their hearts pounding at the impending clash. Just as the beast closed in on Ibi, a fireball exploded against the asphalt, landing right between them, forcing both to halt their movements. Everyone was left in shock, eyes darting around to find the source of the sudden intervention. Their attention was drawn to a nearby building where, perched on the roof, sat another fiery creature. A fire monster, its body crackling with flames as it observed the scene below. The air around it shimmered with heat, and everyone stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to expect next. Meanwhile, on a boat far from the chaos, an unknown man casually lit a cigarette and remarked, "Enough. Zombies can't swim or fly, so the center of the lake is the safest place." Another man, holding a bottle of wine with a polite demeanor, nodded and praised, "Your master is very wise." The man with the cigarette took a drag and added, "Later, we'll raid another ship for supplies. As long as we stay on the water, we're safe." Suddenly, an explosion shook one of the boats, causing the men to panic. "What's going on?" one of them shouted. They watched in horror as a fiery figure appeared in the sky. The men screamed, not knowing what it was, and soon after, the fiery creature descended upon the roof of the mansion where the others were hiding. Back on land, Ibi was still confused by the appearance of this fiery anomaly. Roxy, standing nearby, noticed the flames engulfing the creature and wondered aloud if it was the ally her henchman had mentioned. But even the monster had no idea who the fiery being was. Without warning, the fiery creature lunged at the first monster, knocking it to the ground. Roxy and Ibi were both baffled, watching the intense battle unfold. The first monster managed to get in a kick and sent the fiery entity flying. Their violent clash sent shockwaves that damaged Xian's car, who cried out in dismay over the destruction. "What about my food?" Yao Yu, trying to keep a level head, yelled, "It doesn't matter! We need to leave!" The schoolchildren, along with Yao Yu and Xian, quickly started running for cover. Roxy, growing frustrated, muttered under her breath, "Idiot! Why is he wasting time when Ibi's getting away?" Her monster servant replied that it was too preoccupied with fighting the fiery creature to catch up. Just then, a fireball nearly hit Yao Yu, but Ibi leaped in, saving her. As the battle between the creatures raged on, a burning wall separated them from the others. The group, now cut off from safety, had no choice but to find shelter. Ibi pointed out the underground parking and suggested they hide there until the situation calmed down. Amidst the chaos, the monster, still struggling with the fiery creature, asked, "Can you talk? Did you eat black pearls to become like this too?" The fiery monster let out a pained scream, gripping its head as memories of unknown people forcing it to consume the black pearls flooded back. "I didn't want to eat it," it cried. "They made me. Those maniacs, they've all gone insane." Its voice trembled with rage, and it swore to incinerate them all. Roxy's henchman finally understood and prepared to act. The girl, growing impatient, crossed her arms and sarcastically remarked, "Are they going to finish this or start kissing?" She glanced at her monster and ordered it to go after Ibi, who was still searching for a safe place. The monster reassured her, claiming it could still smell Ibi's scent and would find him quickly. The fiery creature, overhearing this, asked, "You're looking for Ibi? Can he help return me to normal?" Desperation filled its voice. The monster hesitated before replying, "Perhaps. If he knows how black gold works, he might. The fiery creature, hopeful for the first time, agreed to join in their search. Meanwhile, in the underground parking, Xian whispered to Ibi, "I think it's quiet outside now. Maybe they've left." Ibi shushed him, urging him to stay quiet as they continued running, knowing they weren't safe just yet. Suddenly, a car crashed beside them, and as the dust settled, they turned to see a monstrous figure emerge, laughing. "Finally, I found you," it said, blocking their path. The monster stood between them and escape, addressing Ibi directly. "Before I kill you, tell me all the secrets of black gold, and this time, no tricks." Ibi frowned and ordered Jian to take Yao Yu and run while he held the monster back. Jian agreed, but before they could make their escape, the fiery creature from before appeared, cutting them off. Xian glanced at Ibi, realizing they were surrounded. From the back of a nearby car, Li Ruoxi laughed, declaring triumphantly, "You won't escape from me now, Ibi. 2 mutants want you dead, so just accept your fate." Ibi, furious, turned to his friends and told them to hide and stay as far away from him as possible. Li Ruoxi then commanded the mutants to kill him. One of the monsters charged forward, but Ibi swiftly drew his sword and took a defensive stance. The monster struck, but Ibi ducked, pulled out a pistol, and shot Li Ruoxi in the shoulder. Her scream echoed through the air as the monster turned around in response to her cry. Ibi fired several more shots, but the monster raised his hand, blocking the bullets, and warned Ibi to stop harming her. As Ibi swung his sword, a green energy beam shot toward the enemies. But before it could hit, the fiery creature attacked from behind, forcing Ibi to dodge quickly to avoid being scorched. Watching the intense battle, Yao Yu grabbed a small hatchet and hurled it at the mutant, catching its attention. Xian, alarmed, shouted, "What are you doing?" Taking advantage of the distraction, Ibi struck from behind. He hit a pipe above the monster, causing a stream of water to pour down and extinguish the flames engulfing the fiery creature. Ibi then severed the monster's hand, eliciting a scream of pain. He swung again, but missed, and the fiery creature fled to the side. Meanwhile, another mutant cradled Li Ruoxi in his arms, watching from the sidelines. He growled, "Ibi is ruthless. I'll make him pay next time." With that, the monsters disappeared into the shadows. Ibi, exhausted, dropped to his knees, and Yao Yu rushed to his side, asking if he was hurt. Ibi shook his head but admitted, "Facing 2 anomalies at once was something I never expected." Xian, still in shock, asked, "Where did they come from?" Ibi remained silent for a moment before explaining, "Anomalies are mutated people, the result of consuming black gold. Most who eat it become zombies. But in rare cases, less than 0.1%, a person can merge with black gold and become an anomaly with immense powers. However, retaining one's consciousness after the mutation is even." Rarer Xian, wide-eyed, asked, "How do you know all this?" Ibi stood up, still catching his breath. "I'll explain everything later. Right now, we need to figure out where to go next." As they cautiously emerged from the underground parking lot, Xian groaned in frustration. "My car! My food! I need to go back and check on it," he muttered, clearly distressed over the damage. Ibi, on the other hand, was lost in thought, his mind racing. "This world, it's not going to disappear. The feeling of impending doom is growing stronger," he reflected. "The day of judgment is approaching, and before things get any worse, I need to do something, anything, to change the course of this fate." With a grim resolve, Ibi silently vowed to forge new, more powerful weapons as soon as possible, tools that could help him and his companions stand a better chance against the mutated monsters and anomalies that roamed this apocalyptic world. As rain started pouring down, they stood by the damaged car. Sean let out a heavy sigh, shaking his head. "It's all over. My baby can't be helped," he muttered while pulling a bag from the wreckage. "All that's left is to pick up the things and the food." He sighed again, clearly upset about the blocked exit from the underground parking, lamenting, "There were so many good cars in there." Jan then handed out green raincoats, mentioning that they'd have to make do since there were no umbrellas. "Are we going to search for a place to shelter from the rain, or are we still looking for a car to continue our journey?" he asked, uncertainty in his voice. Yao Yu appeared to be deep in thought. EB noticed and asked, "Is something wrong?" She responded, "I've been to this place before. My dad's old friend lived nearby and he used to bring me here to play. It's not far from here, we just need to head straight toward the mountains." Xian's curiosity piqued. "Your dad's friend? What kind of person is he? Do you think he's still alive?" Yao Yu hesitated but then replied, "He's a little strange, but I hope he's doing well. He has a big house with high walls so zombies shouldn't be able to get inside, and he has a lot of computers." Xian perked up. "A lot of computers? Does he have a computer club? That could be better than any supermarket we've found." EB nodded in agreement. "We'll check it out. Lead the way, Yao Yu. Maybe your dad's still there too." Just as they were about to set off, Xian's eyes widened in alarm. "Zombies, they're closing in on us!" he shouted. EB unsheathed his sword, ready for battle. "Looks like we'll have to fight our way through." He gripped the sword tightly as they prepared to confront the advancing horde, and moved forth by making path by slashing the dead. At that moment, EB cut another zombie in half, breathing heavily as fatigue set in. Xian became concerned and asked if he was okay, noticing how pale he looked. Maybe they should find a place to rest first, but EB brushed off the suggestion, insisting he was fine. He then turned to Yao Yu, asking how far it was to her father's friend's house. She pointed towards the tunnel, explaining they would climb the slope to reach it. But the tunnel was filled with too much water, likely due to a clogged drainage system. Gritting his teeth, EB looked to the side and noticed some wooden planks. He instructed Yao Yu to sit on one, and they would push her forward. She climbed onto the board while EB held it steady, and Xian walked behind, carrying their things. The tunnel loomed dark and intimidating. EB reassured them that there weren't any zombies that could dive after them, but Yao Yu turned around anxiously, asking about the buddy system. Just then, EB felt himself losing consciousness and plunged into the water, followed by Yao Yu's frightened screams as the rain continued to pour. The black monster sliced through zombies, pulling out green-black pearls. These energy black metals should be enough, he thought. Once back at the residency, he shouted, "Ruo Shi!" She lay on the bed, in pain, and weakly replied, "Give me all of it. Just give them to me and get lost." As the monster stepped outside, he faced the fire monster. "Has she eaten them?" he asked. "She's hesitating," the black monster murmured. "I've seen others forced to eat black pearls, and the results are terrifying. I didn't die, but I became like this," the fire monster said, his tone heavy. Looking up at the sky, the black monster replied, "I don't want her to die. Is her only choice to eat the energy black metal?" The fire monster said, "I've cauterized her wound, but without medical help, she'll die. If she mutates, she'll be one of us. That's not so bad. She won't fear zombies." Furious, the black monster shot back, "We can kill anyone. We'll take revenge." He glanced at the fire monster and added, "But Ye Bei is still out there." "Your hand. It can't regrow." "We need to team up," he continued. "We have to subdue him and torture him for the secrets of the energy black metal and how to turn back into human." The fire monster sighed. "Sob, he's too strong. His weapon can even block my fire." He introduced himself. I'm Zhou Bo." The black monster replied, "I'm Wang Sheng." At this moment, Wang Sheng and Zubo were standing together, exchanging words about the relentless rain that had flooded the city streets. The downpour showed no signs of stopping. Concerned for Li Ruoxi, Wang Sheng moved towards the door, stating that he wanted to discuss something with her. As he entered the room, he saw her sitting on her knees, trembling, enveloped in a mysterious purple glow. The sight left him momentarily stunned, unsure of what was happening to her. Wang Sheng, filled with panic, exclaimed Li Ruoxi's name as her body convulsed. The girl let out a scream, her eyes glowing an eerie green, and dark veins started crawling across her skin. She clutched her heart in agony, her breathing heavy and strained. Just then, Zubo rushed into the room, alarmed by the situation, and asked, What's happening? Before anyone could respond, there was a sudden purple explosion. The force of the blast shook the room, plunging everything into darkness. In the unconscious mind of Evie, the girl, still clutching the torch, turned towards Evie and coldly asked, "Where's your colleague hiding? Let him answer now." Evie spat back, his voice filled with defiance. "Stupid! You better stay far away from me!" Lee Ruoxi scoffed, unimpressed. "You don't appreciate good treatment," she sneered, before violently shoving his head under the water. Evie let out a strangled scream as everything around him faded into darkness. When he woke up, the harsh glow of a white ceiling stared back at him. Groaning, he sat up, his body aching with the effort. Across the room, Yao Yu lay on a bed, her eyes fluttering open. She beamed joyfully. "You're awake." Evie smiled faintly and asked, "Is this really it?" Yao Yu nodded, replying, "This is the house of an old friend of my dad." Just then, Xian entered the room, holding a tray. "Finally, you're awake. You've been out the whole day," he remarked. Evie, still trying to recover, asked, "Why are you still here?" Xian gave a small chuckle. "Don't be so cold. We dragged you here with everything we had." Before Evie could ask how they managed in the midst of such strong winds and rain, an unfamiliar voice chimed in. "I'm also curious how you got here." An elderly man entered the room, his presence both calming and commanding. A student, an overweight guy, and a girl somehow made it through a horde of zombies? I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Yao Yu's eyes lit up. "Grandpa Jang." She explained how, after Evie lost consciousness, they pulled him out of the water, but had no idea what to do next. Luckily, Grandpa Jang had spotted them through his CCTV, recognized Yao Yu, and came to their rescue. "Thanks to him, we were able to get here safely," she added. Evie, still groggy, asked, "You saw everything?" The elderly man chuckled. "Of course I did. You fought off those zombies like you were chopping vegetables. Impressive, I must say. But where did you get that weapon?" As Evie tried to sit up, he insisted, "I'm grateful for your help, but I can't tell you anything about the weapon. Please let me—" His sentence was cut short as he lost his balance and nearly collapsed. Yao Yu rushed to his side, helping him. Dr. Zhang Han, with a kind smile, said, "It seems using that sword drained a lot of your strength." He then introduced himself more formally. "My name is Zhang Han, but you can call me Dr. Jen. This is my research institute. Since the outbreak, it's also been my home." With arms outstretched, he gestured to the space around them. "Welcome." Evie's mind raced as he tried to place the name. "Dr. Zhang Han, the famous scientist who studied zombies." Suddenly, it all clicked. This was the man who first studied and named the mysterious substance known as black gold. For someone interested in mechanics, meeting Dr. Zhang Han felt like meeting a sage sent from above. But could it really be him? Nervously, Evie asked, "Are you really Dr. Zhang Han?" The elderly man chuckled, seemingly embarrassed. "Well, I'm ashamed to admit I gave myself that doctorate," he said with a grin. "I only work part-time at this institute." Evie's excitement wavered. Perhaps it was just a case of similar names, and he had gotten excited for nothing. But then, Dr. Zhang added, "Although I might not be the doctor, Zhang Han you're thinking of, my interest in your weapon is very real. Let me study it for the sake of humanity's future." Evie considered this. If this was truly Dr. Zhang Han, it might be a test. Reluctantly, he agreed, but added one condition: a living zombie. The doctor's eyes widened at the request, but he quickly regained his composure and led Evie downstairs. As they approached Evie's weapon, Dr. Zhang scanned it curiously but didn't tamper with anything. When Evie picked up the sword with ease, the doctor exclaimed in awe, "Incredible! Only you can lift it so effortlessly. I nearly threw my back out dragging you here." Evie looked around, noticing the doctor's workspace. With all this equipment, he could probably create another powerful weapon, Evie thought to himself. Dr. Zhang, catching on to Evie's thoughts, asked in shock, "You can create weapons? Did you make this one?" Evie nodded slightly, but then replied firmly, "The creation process is a secret. I won't reveal it. Otherwise, you won't get any more zombies to study. Jang Han leaped up, excited and frustrated at the same time. Impudent as ever, he mocked, half joking. Ibi smirked, telling him, bring me something tasty every day and I'll think about it. Laughing, Dr. Jang opened a couple of photos on his computer. The first photo was of Ibi, listing his age and occupation. The second photo, however, was of Xian. But instead of detailed information, there was a notification, missing. Person could not be found. Rain poured outside as zombies roamed the flooded streets. Yao Yu sat at the surveillance system, typing away at the keyboard. Dr. Jang approached, carrying 2 mugs of hot coffee. "What are you doing?" he asked. Start led to see her. Yao Yu smiled, determined. "I'm doing my best, doctor." "Are you scanning for survivors?" "How admirable," he replied, before mentioning that he had no news from her father. His CCTV system only monitored the coastal area, which was infested with zombies. With a soft smile, Yao Yu reassured him, "You're good, just like my dad. He'll be fine." Dr. Jang laughed, but then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "What about those 2 who came with you? That student doesn't seem ordinary. Mastering such high technology at his age, and with that look in his eyes, like someone who's killed before," he continued, adding, "The fat one seems ordinary, but I sense he has secrets too." Suddenly, Xian appeared behind them, exclaiming, "Discussing people behind their backs, doctor? Not nice." Xian turned to the doctor, pointing out, "You're the most suspicious one here. A research center this big, helipads, fuel tanks, solar panels, stockpiles of food and supplies. It's all a bit much for someone just studying zombies." Dr. Jang's expression shifted, and he erupted angrily. "You think I'm strange? I had a premonition. I knew Judgment Day was coming, so I prepared. You live off my food and stay in my house, yet you accuse me of foul play. My goal is to save all of humanity." Shan shouted back, "All of humanity? You've hacked cameras all over the coastal region spying on people. You interfere with their lives without permission. That's hardly noble." Dr. Jang, infuriated, retorted, "If not for those cameras, who would have saved you? You'd be dead by now." The argument intensified until Yao Yu intervened, raising her voice and pleading, "Please stop quarreling." As tensions rose, something suddenly pierced into Xian's neck. He flinched, turning around with a confused look, only to see Ibi standing behind him, holding a syringe. "Stay still," Ibi muttered, drawing blood quickly. Xian, still shocked, asked, "Why the hell did you inject me?" Ibi, calm and composed, replied, "I needed to take a blood sample. The first wave of zombie mutations is about to begin, and we don't have much time left." He pocketed the syringe and made his way toward the door, adding, "New disasters are coming. We have to be ready for what's next." Dr. Jang Han, wide-eyed, asked, "Zombies mutate?" Ibi nodded as he glanced back. "Yes. The mutation is inevitable, and it's happening soon." Meanwhile, across the city, a group of school children had taken refuge on the roof of a nearby building. One of them peered out over the sea of zombies below, trembling with fear. "We're trapped! There's no way out!" he cried. The streets were flooded, cutting off any escape route. One boy knelt beside a long-haired girl's body, weeping. The group was losing hope, knowing they had no food and no way to survive much longer. Then, one of the kids revealed a handful of black pearls. The group gasped. "I took these while helping Ibi. I overheard one of the mutants say he gained strength after eating." "One of these pearls," the boy explained. "Are you serious?" one of his friends asked, horrified. "You can't actually be thinking of eating that." "We have no other choice," the boy insisted. "If we can gain their strength, we might be able to break through the zombie horde and escape." Before they could decide, someone pointed to the sky. "What's that?" he shouted. A swirling purple tornado began to form in the distance, casting an eerie glow over the skyline. Back at Dr. Jang Han's house, Ibi was hunched over a workbench, focused intently on his task. Xian, still rubbing his neck, observed from a distance. "What's he working on?" he muttered. Dr. Jang Han, distracted, replied, "He's building new equipment to protect us from the mutants. But if all zombies evolve into those spiked fire-breathing monsters, we're doomed." Xian shook his head. "I don't know if they'll all mutate, but if they do, it's over for us, and you don't even have proper weapons to defend this place." The doctor, clearly frustrated, snapped, "This is a refuge, not a military base. Why would I need weapons?" Xian glared back. "A refuge without weapons is just a death trap. We're sitting ducks here." Their argument was cut short when Yao Yu suddenly burst into the room, her face pale with fear. "Dr. Jang Han!" she shouted. "I saw my dad on one of the cameras." Everyone rushed to the monitor. Xian, still tense, asked, "You saw him on the cameras?" Dr. Jang Han quickly accessed the footage. "That means he's already in the coastal area," he muttered, Yao Yu's fingers flying across the keyboard. The screen showed Yao Yu's father, standing amidst a horde of zombies. But strangely, they weren't attacking him. Dr. Jang Han leaned in closer, perplexed. "Look at his movements. Has he become a zombie? Why aren't they attacking him?" Yao Yu, her voice trembling, whispered, "Dad!" She watched as her father turned his head slightly before disappearing between the buildings. Tears welled in Yao Yu's eyes. Xian, attempting to comfort her, said softly, "We don't know how he's avoiding the zombies, but at least he's still alive." Yao Yu wiped her tears, trying to hold herself together. Dr. Jang Han, deep in thought, reasoned aloud, "Judging by his appearance, it's possible he covered himself with zombie remains and smeared their blood on him. Maybe that's how he's hiding from them. Do zombies really rely on smell when they attack? We need to investigate this." Yao Yu, looking sad, glanced at him, and Dr. Jang Han quickly apologized. "Sorry, it's just a habit of mine to overthink these things. I understand your desire to save your father, but the weather's been awful constant rain. The tunnel leading west is completely flooded. There's no way through." Yao Yu bowed her head in resignation. Xian, standing nearby, suggested, "What about contacting Ibi? Maybe he's come up with some new gear by now." Yao Yu nodded in agreement, and they both went to Ibi. However, Ibi was decisive in his response. "Nope, not done yet. And there's no need to rush me. Don't distract me unless you're bringing food." Yao Yu gave up, sighing in frustration. Xian, annoyed, chimed in, "Why don't you slow down for once? You're no help or comfort right now." Ibi raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You think you can do better? Go help yourself then." Xian stared at him for a moment before a newly finished weapon was placed in front of him. Ibi explained, "I've added your blood to these weapons. You can use them now." Xian picked up the sword and felt its power immediately. Ibi continued, "When you swing it, make sure to channel energy into the blade. It'll make it easier to use, but be careful if you don't control it, you'll burn out." Xian's grin stretched from ear to ear. "I'll be careful," he assured, then grabbed the gun Ibi had modified. "Did you tweak this too?" Ibi nodded, giving detailed instructions. "Before shooting, turn on the power source. Let the energy accumulate, then fire. The energy will shoot out with the bullet. But remember, while there's plenty of power, bullets are limited, so aim wisely." Zhan, licking his lips in excitement, marveled at the gun. "An electromagnetic gun. This is amazing." He sprinted outside, eager to test it out. Lifting the gun, he aimed at the sky, yelling, "One shot to the soul!" A bright green beam fired into the sky, slicing through the rain. Laughing wildly, Xian activated the sword next. "This blade can cut through anything!" He swung it around, still bursting with excitement. Dr. Jang Han, watching from the entrance of the lab, shouted angrily, "Stop that! Don't wave your sword around here, it's dangerous." But Xian was too caught up in his own thrill. "I'm unstoppable," he declared, pulling on his rubber boots and raincoat. "Zombies! Abnormals! Bring them on! I'll kill them all!" He turned to Yao Yu and confidently promised, "I'll bring your dad back, safe and sound. Just wait here with the doctor." Yao Yu, embarrassed by his enthusiasm, muttered, "Will he be okay?" Dr. Jang Han shrugged. "Who knows? It all depends on how long he keeps showing off." Before leaving, Xian knocked on the camera. "Can you hear me?" he asked. Dr. Jang Han sighed and replied, "Yes, but remember the road to the western region is flooded. You'll have to go through the western mountains. But there are no cameras there, and the area's crawling with zombies. Don't act recklessly. Annoyed, Jian called him names. I'm sick of your warnings. I'll be fine. And don't expect Yao Yu to babysit you forever. He descended the slope, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Are they already coming up here? He muttered, noticing a growing crowd of zombies. But he steeled himself, gripping the artifact Ibi had crafted. No need to worry. I've got this. With a lunge, the beam from his weapon cut through several zombies with ease. Jian grinned, satisfied. I'm strong. Let them come. Just then, he glanced to the side and spotted a swirling purple tornado in the distance. What the hell is that? He asked himself as the rain continued to pour. Jian continued to kill zombies. Having finished with everyone, he took the earpiece and said whether the doctor and Yao Yu could see that the rain was getting heavier, and in the west, it looked like there was some kind of tornado. Jangan replied that the storm was really strong and the camera's visibility was limited, but from what could be seen, it was 6 points dangerous. He said to come back. Xiaoan, annoyed, said that even good equipment cannot defeat the Lord of Heaven. He turned to Yao Yu, saying that he was very sorry, but he would have to wait until the weather got better. Only then would he be able to go save her dad. Jangan turned to the girl and reassured her that her dad was always lucky. If he managed to escape from the zombies, then the storm was not a hindrance to him. Yao Yu agreed. Xian approached the gate, and a red lamp lit up in the building. The doctor asked in fear if there was a zombie trailing after him. The guy replied that he had already dealt with it, explaining that he first wanted to save Yao Yu's dad, but since that opportunity had disappeared, he had to choose another option, bringing in a living zombie. In truth, Ibi had asked him to do this. Jangan exclaimed and asked again if he really brought a living zombie with him. He told Xian to stand still and not move. He would come down now. The doctor ran downstairs and approached Xian, who said that he had cut off the limbs so the monster wouldn't get rowdy. The doctor bent over and observed the zombie, noticing it was still frisky, marveling at its persistent will to live and wondering what gave it such energy. He told Xian that he had helped him a lot this time, showing that he was a man of his word. Xian scratched his head and laughed. Yao Yu thought how wonderful it was that they made peace at this time. At that moment, Ibi was off in the distance, quietly checking his equipment, ensuring everything was in working order for whatever challenges lay ahead. As the rain finally stopped and the sun broke through the clouds, its rays illuminated the crowd of zombies. The creatures stirred, raising their heads toward the light. Suddenly, one zombie's eyes shifted color, and its head began to tear open, revealing a mutated monster within. One of these creatures leaped onto a nearby balcony, where a small child was happily chattering about how brightly the sun was shining. In an instant, his innocent joy turned to horror as he spotted the monster. His father, hearing his scream, dashed toward him, frantically calling out for his wife and son. To his horror, the mutant stood in front of him, gripping his wife by the throat and holding their lifeless child. Overcome with terror, the man screamed, powerless against the abomination. Meanwhile, other mutated zombies had infiltrated apartments, shattering windows and attacking people who were desperately trying to hide. At the school, Ibi's classmates were in a frantic scramble to escape, desperately trying to outrun a mutant monster that was about to overtake one of the girls. Just as the creature lunged, something yanked it by the neck, slammed it onto the ground, and pinned it down. A powerful strike followed, rendering the mutant helpless. As the girl ran, she glanced over her shoulder and witnessed the shocking scene. Another monstrous figure standing over the defeated mutant, pulling a glowing red pearl from its brain. To her astonishment, she recognized the creature. It was her classmate, Feng. A massive crowd of zombies filled the streets below, all moving in perfect unison as if they were a school of fish. Liruoxi sat on the roof of a building, her hand outstretched, controlling the horde with ease. Zubo, observing from beside her, remarked on how powerful it was to witness so many zombies obeying her every command. Liruoxi grinned. The days she had spent suffering to harness this power were not in vain. Her hand, shrouded in purple smoke, pulsed with control. She then asked if they had located Ibi. Wang Shang responded that Ibi was hiding in the mountains at a research institute turned refuge and suggested he could go alone to kill him. But Li Ruoxi had no interest in a quick death for Ibi. Raising her hand, she declared, "How could I let him die so easily? I'll tear him to shreds myself. How else will I satisfy the hatred in my heart? He needs to feel the creeping hopelessness first." At the research institute, Xian stood by the car, eyeing Dr. Zhang with concern. "Why did the alarm go off? We were just about to leave," he asked. Dr. Zhang's face tightened. "We can't go anywhere now. There's a big problem. We need to get back to the lab immediately," he urged. The security cameras they had installed in the city revealed a terrifying sight. A massive horde of zombies was gathering and heading straight for the research center. Xian, alarmed, asked, "What do you mean by massive? How many?" The doctor's voice rose in panic. "Probably more than 1,000. Xian's mind raced. "Is it because we're the last survivors, or did we offend someone?" Dr. Zhang shook his head. "I don't know what we did, but you'd better talk to Ibi. He's the only one who might know more." Without another word, Xian rushed to Ibi's door, pounding on it. "Ibi, everything's going to hell out here. There are 1,000 zombies coming our way. What do we do?" Ibi's calm voice drifted from the other side of the door. "Dr. Zhang just told me." Frustrated, Xian pressed on. "Are you ready to go out there and wipe them all out?" "I'm not ready yet," Ibi replied flatly, his focus on the computer screen, typing away with determination. Xian's temper flared. "Are you joking? You expect me to fight thousands of zombies on my own?" Unfazed, Ibi responded, "I warned you that we had to be ready for this. Though I admit, it's escalating faster than I anticipated. We can only rely on ourselves now. If Dr. Zhang is worth his salt, he'll figure something out." Xian erupted in anger. "Do you even understand what's happening? We don't have time to come up with a plan." Ibi remained silent, his attention unwavering. Muttering curses, Xian stormed off, yelling about talking to a brick wall. He climbed the observation tower, and what he saw below shook him waves of zombies as far as the eye could see. "There are so many. No matter how strong the walls are, they won't hold them back," he muttered to himself. Without hesitation, Xian headed toward the car. Dr. Zhang, watching from the monitors, asked why he was getting in the vehicle. "Open the gate. I'm going to hold them off. You figure something out," Xian demanded. "And if I don't make it back, find a way to escape." From behind, Yao Yu shouted, pleading for him to stop. But Xian, determined, called back, "Don't worry. I'm not going to die that easily." He sped off, leaving the research center behind, preparing to face the horde head-on. Xian pulled out his pistol, aiming at the swarm of zombies below. With a sharp crack, a green beam shot out, striking the center of the horde. As the beam hit, zombies disintegrated on the spot, their bodies reduced to ashes. A grin spread across Xian's face. "How invigorating! It feels like I don't even need to aim. I'll turn them all to dust," he chuckled. He fired again, unleashing another blast of energy into the horde. From her vantage point, Li Ruoxi observed the scene with Wang Sheng beside her. Wang Sheng, taken aback, remarked, "That's some powerful weaponry. We didn't expect this." Li Ruoxi smirked. "This complicates things, but I want to see how long they can hold out." Xian shot at the zombies, but despite his efforts, there seemed to be no end to them. Suddenly, a fireball struck his car, causing it to flip and catch fire. Yao Yu, watching the chaos unfold on the security cameras, exclaimed in shock. Xian quickly escaped the burning vehicle, realizing they were under attack by a fire monster. How dare he sneak attack? Xian gritted his teeth, firing at the creature, but the monster dodged and retaliated with a powerful blow, slamming into the car again. Xian managed to dodge the attack and returned fire, forcing the creature named Zubo to retreat. Frustrated, Xian shouted at Zubo, calling him a coward. However, as he regained focus, he saw a horde of zombies rushing towards him. Dr. Zhang's voice crackled through the earpiece, warning that if Xian got surrounded, he wouldn't survive. He had to retreat quickly. But Xian, now sprinting, suspected this was all some kind of trap. Suddenly, Wang Shang appeared right next to him, launching a surprise attack. Xian barely dodged in time. He pulled out his pistol and fired, but missed, so he resorted to his sword. However, Wang Shang was quick, easily dodging his swings. Xian couldn't help but wonder if Wang Shang was even more agile than he had anticipated. "Die, Wang Shang!" Xian shouted as he fired again, but Wang Shang dodged effortlessly once more. Xian, feeling confident, muttered to himself, "I'm not afraid of you." Meanwhile, from a nearby tower, Li Ruoxi watched the battle unfold and commanded the zombies to rush Xian. The sheer speed of their approach took him by surprise. Despite slicing through them with precision, Xian quickly realized they were too fast for him to handle. He decided to switch to an escape strategy when, suddenly, a zombie dropped from the sky and landed right in front of him. "What the how are they falling from the sky?" he thought in confusion. Wang Shang had been using the zombies like weapons, throwing them towards Xian like metal projectiles. The situation had taken a drastic turn. "How the hell?" he muttered in disbelief. Wang Shang was using them like living projectiles, hurling zombies toward him with deadly accuracy. A horde of zombies charged at Xian, while Wang Shang relentlessly hurled more of them at him like deadly missiles. Xian raised his gun, expertly shooting down the zombies in midair. His frustration grew as he yelled, "What the hell am I supposed to do now?" Just as he spoke, another zombie crashed right at his feet, teeth gnashing, ready to bite. In a split-second move, Xian swung his sword, cutting the zombie down before it could sink its teeth into him. His heart raced, but there was no time to rest. More were coming. Xian glanced at the horde of zombies still charging toward him, an overwhelming wave of the undead. His mind raced. Firing from this close, he'd risk blowing himself up. Swinging his sword, there were just too many, it wouldn't be enough. He cursed under his breath, realizing he was running out of options. A sudden flash of light illuminated the battlefield, stopping everyone in their tracks, both allies and enemies alike, stunned by the massive blast. Wang Shang, wide-eyed, demanded to know what was happening. A green light blanketed the entire horde of monsters, casting an eerie glow over the chaos. It was Ibi, clad in his new, imposing uniform. His legs and arms were encased in iron, radiating power. Xian, overwhelmed with relief, shouted, "Buddy Ibi's finally here!" Yao Yu let out a sigh of relief, thankful that Ibi arrived just in time. An old man standing nearby commented, "This guy is something else." Xian, watching in awe, marveled, "So this is the deadly weapon he's been working on for days. It's incredible!" But Ibi quickly warned him not to relax. The enemy was still nearby. If Xian had the strength, he needed to clear out the zombies on the left, while Ibi would handle those on the right. The main goal was to ensure the zombies didn't reach the walls. Xian laughed confidently, replying, "With Ibi here, everything will go smoothly. He'll take care of everyone." He fired a shot toward the incoming zombies, while Ibi, now equipped with his powerful exoskeleton, unleashed devastating attacks. The iron hand of his suit crushed the zombies as if they were nothing. Xian was impressed, complimenting the suit's power. "That looks cool." His excitement growing, he added, "After this wave, we'll be able to collect over 1,000 black gold pearls. Maybe I could ask him to make me some battle armor. Yes, time to chop down. Even more!" He laughed wildly as he swung his sword, fully energized by the battle. Li Ruoxi watched intently from the tower. Wang Shang, standing next to her, commented that Ibi's weapons were far beyond anything they had imagined. They couldn't even dream of matching that level of power. Li Ruoxi clenched her teeth, irritated. "He thinks just because he's wrapped himself in iron, he can survive? Let's see how long that lasts," she muttered coldly. Meanwhile, Ibi continued to decimate the zombies, his exoskeleton scattering them effortlessly. Down below, Dr. Zhang and Yao Yu observed in amazement. Dr. Zhang remarked, "This exoskeleton, it's an incredibly advanced piece of technology, and it doesn't seem to come from our time. It's hard to believe he assembled something like this from spare parts." Yao Yu nodded and added, "The truth is, Ibi's weapons are actually made from the pearls found in zombie heads." The old doctor gasped, visibly shocked. "Zombies? Have pearls in their brains? What are they made of? And where exactly are they located?" Yao Yu explained, "They feel like metal, and they're found somewhere near the pituitary gland." Dr. Zhang, grabbing his head in disbelief, began to piece it together. "So these zombies have crystals in their brains and you can create weapons from them? Why did Ibi keep this a secret from me? That's very strange." He turned abruptly, shouting for the girl to continue monitoring the situation. I need to get to the lab and start dissecting the zombie Xian brought in, he declared, racing off towards the laboratory to investigate. At that moment, Li Ruoxi commanded the zombies to charge. The ground shook violently as the horde rushed forward, their sheer numbers making it seem like an earthquake. Xian, seeing the swarm approaching once again, shouted in frustration, "They're coming here again, and it's like an earthquake." Ibi, standing firm, responded sternly. "There will be so many of them, but we just need to focus on killing them. Less thinking, more action." But before he could react, he noticed the zombies were beginning to leap at him from above. Suddenly, one of them exploded right over his head, leaving him startled and confused. He glanced to the side, realizing that Li Ruoxi had clenched her hand, triggering the explosion. Li Ruoxi, her eyes filled with malice, ordered coldly, "Tear him to pieces for me." Ibi, caught in the chaos, thought to himself, "Are these zombies actually capable of self-destruction?" Zubo, observing from a distance, commented with a heavy tone, "This is like a battle between gods. We can't interfere here." Meanwhile, Wang Shang, standing nearby, revealed to Zubo, "Li Ruoxi consumed 7 of those black gold pearls. That's how she became what she is now. During those days, her body was continuously torn apart and transformed. It takes someone truly strong in spirit to endure that kind of torment. But one thing's clear. Her hatred for Ibi runs deep." Zubo pondered aloud. She ate 7 black gold pearls, and not only did she avoid turning into a monster, she became many times stronger than us. So the more black gold you consume, the stronger you become. Wang Shang, shaking his head, replied, "I'm not sure what the exact principle is behind it, but I wouldn't want to endure the torment she did to achieve it. Perhaps the girl we knew is no longer who she was." Li Ruoxi continued blasting zombies relentlessly over Ibi. Finally, he realized that someone was controlling them from behind the scenes. He raised his hand and struck at the tower where Li Ruoxi was positioned, causing her to fall. Wang Shang screamed in fear, but to his shock, Li Ruoxi landed gracefully on the ground. As she looked up, Ibi met her gaze and struck with his hand. She quickly defended herself by creating a living wall of zombies. But it wasn't enough. Ibi was already on her, launching another powerful strike. Though she managed to leap away, it was clear he was stronger. With the next blow, Ibi pressed Li Ruoxi down into the dirt with his exoskeleton hand. "You didn't die that day?" he asked coldly, realizing just how resilient she was. "How many pearls did you consume?" Li Ruoxi tried to fight back, but Ibi ruthlessly lifted his exoskeleton leg and crushed her arm beneath it, causing her to scream in agony. "In my past life, I lost an arm because of you. Now it's time to pay," Ibi said, a dangerous edge to his voice. Just then, Wang Shang rushed forward, yelling at Ibi to let her go. The monster-like Wang attacked swiftly, dodging Ibi's strike and leaping towards him. But Ibi reacted in time, releasing a green beam with one hand while holding Li Ruoxi back with the other. Zubo, watching from afar, marveled at Ibi's strength. How did he manage to kill Wang Shang like that? Even Li Ruoxi. His combat exoskeleton is terrifying, he thought, realizing the situation was becoming desperate. He knew he had to escape before it was too late. Li Ruoxi, writhing in pain, stared up at Ibi as he turned to her. "You're really special, aren't you?" he asked, his tone colder now. "If you can still retain your human form after all this, you're dangerous. The infection must be eradicated." Ibi squeezed his exoskeleton hand, causing Li Ruoxi to scream out once more. Suddenly, the zombies surrounding them began to mutate. Ibi was taken aback, shocked by the transformation. "Are they already entering the first stage of mutation?" he muttered to himself. Yao Yu's voice crackled over the earpiece. "This is bad, Ibi. There are more zombies surrounding the research institute. Xian is holding the main gate, but they're climbing over the walls and breaching the territory." Li Ruoxi, even in her pain, laughed maniacally. "None of you will survive. Soon you'll all turn into zombies and become my slaves," she declared with satisfaction. Grinding his teeth, Ibi finally made his decision. He tossed Li Ruoxi into the growing crowd of mutant zombies, then unleashed twin beams from both hands, obliterating her along with the surrounding monsters. Without hesitating, he ran off toward Xian, ready for the next wave of danger. Meanwhile, Xian realized he had run out of bullets, and the group was completely surrounded by zombies. A mutant zombie lunged at him, but Xian skillfully repelled the attack with his sword. What is this zombie? He wondered. Is it really a new type of anomaly? He slashed the creature's body, but instead of cutting it cleanly, his lightsaber only left a wound. The lightsaber can't cut them instantly anymore, he thought, feeling the pressure as more monsters began to encircle him. He started running, trying to escape while his mind raced. What kind of creatures are these? The light blade doesn't cut them, it only pushes them back slightly. Is this really the first stage of mutation? Yao Yu's voice broke through the chaos on his earpiece. Are you okay? Zombies are climbing over the wall and entering the research institute. Dr. Zhang is busy in the lab and has no idea what's happening outside. I know, Xian replied, his voice tense. But I can't get back to the main building. The zombies have completely surrounded the institute and I'm trapped. Just as he was feeling cornered, Ibi's exoskeleton arm suddenly grabbed him. Xian exclaimed, Can your suit actually fly? Ibi shook his head. No, it's not flight. I'll take you to the research center and your job is to handle any zombies that get inside. He set Xian down in the courtyard of the institute and quickly warned him. Some of these zombies have already undergone the first stage of mutation. Their skin is tougher, but if you hit them enough times, they'll go down. They're more agile now, so don't underestimate them. Exhausted, Xian slumped to the ground. I'm tired to death. I need a break. Ibi glanced at the zombies still storming the outer walls. Xian angrily said, I'll leave the ones outside to you, my friend. Ibi leaped onto the fence, unleashing energy rays into the zombie horde below. As he held the outer wall, a few mutant zombies managed to climb over. One slipped through and headed toward Xian, who was sitting nearby. Xian, noticing the approaching threat, called out to Yao Yu, Can you bring me some water? I'm dying of thirst here. The mutant let out a fierce roar and lunged at him. Xian quickly drew his sword, piercing the zombie before throwing it to the ground and slashing its chest. Annoyed, he muttered, How dare you interrupt my rest? Attacking from behind? Let's see how many strikes it takes to take off your head. Yao Yu emerged moments later with water, asking if Xian was all right. He wiped sweat from his forehead and extracted a pearl from the zombie's head. Observing closely, Yao Yu remarked, This zombie looks different from the others. I saw it on the cameras. Xian examined the pearl and noted, It's red. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Dr. Jangan finished extracting a pearl from a zombie Xian had brought earlier. Inspecting it, he observed, Black pearls look opaque but emit a dark greenish glow. Is this black metal responsible for turning people into zombies? Or is it some kind of polymer formed during the transformation? Black metal, black gold. How many secrets are hidden in all this? Meanwhile, Ibi continued his relentless assault, wiping out the remaining zombies with precision using his exoskeleton. Once the last monster was down, he approached Xian and declared, The zombies are destroyed. You can start collecting pearls now. Xian, impressed, commented, What else can I expect from you? Your efficiency is unmatched. Ibi, however, dismissed the praise, adding, The exoskeleton isn't fully optimized yet. If it were, I'd have been even more effective. Looking outside the gate, Xian noticed the heaps of zombie remains, which now resembled small hills. He sighed and muttered, It's going to take forever to collect all these pearls. Turning to Ibi, he asked, Once I'm done collecting, can you help me create some battle armor? Ibi replied with a weary tone, I've been running on fumes these past few days. Let me get some rest first. Before Ibi could leave, Dr. Jangan called out from the lab, holding up a green pearl. He asked, Don't rush off just yet. Isn't it about time you shared the secrets of black gold? Ibi simply smiled in response. Meanwhile, Xian started the grueling task of harvesting pearls. Despite the massive pile of charred corpses, which made splitting skulls easier, the sheer number of bodies left him drained. He muttered to himself, Doing this alone is just sad. At the research center, Dr. Jangan engaged in a deep conversation with Ibi. The doctor inquired, Is this black gold truly the energy source for zombies? Ibi explained, When a person gets infected with the zombie virus, a black pearl forms in their brain. Zombies can absorb sunlight through a process similar to photosynthesis, storing the energy in these pearls, or black gold. Dr. Jangan was astonished. So zombies retain an ability similar to photosynthesis. But while the pearls emit green light, I couldn't detect chlorophyll or related enzymes. Instead, I found unfamiliar elements. The pearls seem to be made of some kind of active metal. When exposed to heat and light, they react strongly. They even have a strong affinity for blood and metal. E.B. nodded. Especially human blood. The virus spreads faster in humans than in animals or plants, which makes it easier for people to mutate into zombies. After absorbing enough light over time, they enter the first stage of mutation. The doctor exclaimed, "That explains it. I noticed zombies behaving aggressively at night but lazily wandering or standing still during the day. In reality, they were photosynthesizing and storing energy for mutation, but today they've been running around in daylight like crazy." Yao Yu entered with 2 mugs of coffee. E.B. took one and explained, "That's because they were being controlled by anomalies." Dr. Jangan asked, "Are the 2 creatures with black spikes and fire-breathing abilities anomalies? Did they lead the zombies here?" E.B. confirmed, "Yes, those are anomalies that mutated after consuming black gold. The one controlling this horde, however, is a new super-anomalous, my former superior, Li Ruoyi." The doctor was taken aback. "Black gold is edible? How does the human body metabolize it? Can eating black gold grant superpowers or mutations like a transformation pill?" E.B. clarified, "We've researched this. Consuming black gold triggers irreversible mutations. Anomalies pose a serious threat, so we prioritize eliminating them as quickly as possible." Dr. Jangan pondered. "The zombies have mutated. Are we observing the first stage or the second? Eating black gold creates anomalies, and now there are super anomalies. This is a lot to process. I'll need time to study it further." With a stern expression, he turned to E.B. "How do you know so much about this? Your school shouldn't teach these things." E.B. smiled faintly. "I'll tell you when the time comes. For now, you can study this yourself. It'll be more valuable." The doctor, his curiosity piqued, asked, "Can I examine your weapon? It might help my research." E.B. yawned. "I still need it for now, but you're welcome to study it as long as you don't disturb me while I sleep." The doctor eagerly agreed and hurried off to start his research. E.B. yawned. "I still need it for now, but you're welcome to study it as long as you don't disturb me while I sleep." The doctor eagerly agreed and hurried off to start his research. As the evening descended, Yao Yu looked at E.B., who was fast asleep. She felt conflicted. She deeply wanted him to help her find her father, but seeing how exhausted he was from fighting all day, she decided against it. Gently, she draped a blanket over him and sat by his side, leaning against the sofa. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered to herself how much she missed her dad, and soon she began to cry softly. Outside, Jian collapsed onto the ground, throwing away the iron shovel he had been using to break open zombie skulls. "I can't keep doing this," he groaned. "How amazing would it be to have an automatic zombie skull grinder?" But then a thought struck him. If his friend E.B. managed to build him a functioning exoskeleton, his life would change. Inspired by the idea, he vowed to persevere and even joked to himself about trying harder to lose weight so he could fit into the suit. What he didn't notice was Zubo watching him from a distance. Zubo, hiding in the shadows, was overcome with despair. "It's all over," he thought. 1,000 zombies wiped out in a single day. Wang Shang and Li Ruoyi are dead. What should I do now? The monster debated his options. "If I surrender, they'll kill me without hesitation. I'm a monster. There's no way they'd accept me." But his thoughts shifted to something troubling. Just now, those zombies turned blood red, as if they were molting. They escaped Li Ruoyi's control and attacked me instead. I had no choice but to burn them all. He shuddered at the possibility of all zombies mutating like that. If this keeps happening, they'll become even more aggressive and dangerous. What can I do? His resolve hardened. I need to collect more black gold, consume more of it. If I become stronger, maybe I can find a way to turn human again. Just as Zubo was steeling himself, he froze. A strange white mutated monster appeared before him, its imposing figure blocking his path. The white creature silently gestured for Zubo to follow, waving its hand dismissively. Cautious but curious, Zubo hesitated for a moment before deciding to trail the mysterious being into the unknown. As night fell, Yao Yu woke up and noticed Jian resting nearby while Ibi was busy in his workshop tinkering with something. Outside, the roads were littered with the corpses of zombies. Elsewhere, Yao Yu's father stood at the entrance of the looted zoo mini-market. Spotting a note left behind by his daughter, he read her message. "I'm going to find you." He muttered her name, wondering aloud where she might be now. Zombies shuffled down the street, but strangely, they ignored him entirely as he stood in their midst. Meanwhile, at the research institute, Xian was awestruck at the sight of a massive armored vehicle. "What is this?" he exclaimed. "A tank? An armored car? It looks like it was pieced together from several vehicles." Running around the car, he admired every detail, calling it super cool. Turning to Ibi, he eagerly asked if the black gold collected was used in its construction and if it could transform into an exoskeleton. Ibi chuckled dryly, responding, "Do you think this is a sci-fi movie? It's just a car. Stick to turning the wheel rather than dreaming about exoskeletons." Ibi explained the car was constructed with 2,117 pieces of black gold and 12 pieces of red-black gold taken from zombies that underwent the first wave of mutation. He emphasized its powerful engine, cautioning that it required skilled handling. Xian, starry-eyed, exclaimed, "You get me, Ibi. You're my hero. Can I try it out?" Ibi nodded, saying the controls weren't much different from a regular car. Just then, Yao Yu appeared with a massive pink bunny-shaped backpack, saying she wanted to join them. Ibi refused outright. "There are mutated zombies everywhere. If you step outside, you'll die. We can't look after you." Yao Yu protested, reminding Ibi she had waited patiently for days. "Shouldn't I have a part in finding my father?" she pleaded. But Ibi firmly told her no, adding that he'd ask Dr. Zhang to tie her up in the lab if she continued. Tears welled in Yao Yu's eyes as Xian peeked out of the car. "Why are you making her cry, Ibi? Seniors shouldn't act like that." Dr. Zhang arrived and consoled Yao Yu, giving her a newly repaired drone. He explained that using black gold had greatly improved its battery life and range, turning it into a reliable observation tool. "You can attach it to the car as a transit station and activate it anytime for a wider view," he said. Yao Yu, wiping her tears, thanked the doctor, who reassured her she could help by staying in the observation room and monitoring their journey. Ibi acknowledged the doctor's ingenuity, and Zhang laughed, admitting he wasn't a real doctor, but could still manage a few tricks. With everything ready, Ibi loaded the exoskeleton into the armored vehicle. "Time to move out," he said. Xian started the engine, exclaiming, "The incomparable Iron Bowl is ready to roll!" As the vehicle roared onto the streets, Yao Yu promised to keep them in sight and urged them to be careful. Xian, overjoyed, marveled at the car's power as it smashed through obstacles. "It's like cutting tofu!" he shouted gleefully. The armored car sped down the road, ramming into abandoned vehicles with ease, setting its sights on the crowded bridge ahead. Abi mentioned that the previous CCTV footage showed Yao Yu's father was already at the embankment, so they could focus their search in that area. Xiao Han, noticing something strange, pointed out that not a single zombie was visible here. He speculated that maybe they were all destroyed when they were brought to the research institute. Suddenly, mutated zombies spotted the car and jumped onto it. Xian exclaimed, "You just name the devil and they will appear," recalling how they had tried to break the glass. He shouted that the monsters were blocking his view and asked Ibi if there were any external weapons on the car. Ibi replied that ordinary gunpowder weapons hadn't been installed and they wouldn't be effective against these zombies, but now they had something better. He pressed a button and the machine lit up with an electric charge, expanding outward. The mutants were instantly incinerated. Xian exclaimed in awe, "It just incinerated everyone." "Cool," Eb added. "Since there are zombies here who have undergone the first wave of mutation, there are no people left alive in this area. We can just drive through it." As they continued, a man stood on the roof, watching them. He grinned and remarked that it was quite interesting. They stopped, and Xian said that it was here that Yao Yu had seen her father through the cameras. The area was unusually quiet. Eb suggested launching the drone so Yao Yu could control it and search from above. The drone flew into the sky, scanning the area. The girls, speaking from the rooms on the upper floors, noted traces of previous inhabitants. But now the place was empty. Yao Yu recalled that her father had walked in this direction, though she wasn't sure if he had stopped there. Xian asked Eb what their next move should be. Eb replied that if there was nothing urgent to do, he could check out apartments on the lower floors, but he was exhausted and needed some rest after several late nights. Jian, still feeling safer in the car, suggested driving and honking the horn. Yao Yu's father might hear it and come out. Eb pressed the horn, and at that exact moment, a crowd of zombies began to approach them. Yao Yu immediately warned that zombies were heading toward them. Jian, surprised, said, "I didn't expect them to arrive so quickly, but this works out perfectly. Time to test out the weapons." He pressed a button, and sharp spikes emerged from the wheels of the car. With a laugh, he drove the car straight into the zombies, knocking them down. He then pressed another button, and lasers shot out, blowing up the monsters. Xian was delighted with the results. Yao Yu warned him to be careful not to destroy any houses, as her father might be inside one of them. Xian pouted and said, "We need something quieter." He pressed another button, and crushers in the car opened up, grinding the zombies. The car's system notified them that one piece of black gold had been collected. Xian was amazed, exclaiming, "Is this really an automatic zombie thresher?" He spread his arms wide and jokingly said, "I love this thing." Ao Yu, checking the camera, asked if everything was fine, as she could hear so much noise. She then noticed her father's car on the screen, about 500 meters away. She sent them the image and explained that there was no one in the car, its windows were damaged, and the front part had been wrecked. She wondered if her father had gotten into trouble while picking up supplies. Eb suggested checking the car for any messages her father might have left. After all, he couldn't have gone far in such a short amount of time. Yao Yu was left wondering where her father might be when she suddenly coughed and collapsed onto the table. The doctor rushed over, asking what was wrong with her. Xian and Eb arrived at the abandoned car, and while Xian inspected it, Yao Yu's condition worsened. The doctor explained that Yao Yu had lost consciousness, and it seemed that her illness had resurfaced. When she focused too much on something, she forgot to take her medication. Luckily, the doctor had some medicine on hand. He expressed sympathy for her, noting how heartbroken her father must be over her illness. The old man, not being an expert in leukemia treatment, remarked how difficult it would be to find the right doctor in this apocalypse. He suggested they go to Pei Hospital in Annie for the equipment and medicine they needed. Once they returned to the research institute, he promised to do everything he could to help. Eb nodded in understanding. Xian approached, saying he had checked Yao Yu's father's car but found no notes. It seemed that after the crash, he had immediately fled the area, leaving behind the luggage in the car. Xian also discovered something unusual, a small black iron box, which was scattered throughout the car. There was no logo or description on them, and they appeared to contain either sugar or medicine. Yao Yu's store didn't sell anything like this. Eb speculated, "Maybe these are special pills. We should take them and show them to the doctor." Xian agreed that it might help, adding that the girl would feel better. He then asked if they would continue the search for her father, to which Eb responded that they needed to go to Pei Hospital first. The doctor had sent him a list of medications they needed. As Xian started the car, the doctor radioed in, telling them that he needed to continue monitoring Yao Yu's condition and the progress of the black gold experiment. He wouldn't be able to control the drone or conduct aerial surveillance, but they could still communicate through it. The doctor reminded them to be careful on their way. Jian, hearing the news about Yao Yu's illness, remarked, "So, she really does have leukemia. She's never fainted before. It's not surprising Ibi didn't let her come with us." He wanted to say more, but stopped himself when Ibi cut him off, ordering him to just drive the car. As they drove, Xian thought to himself, "In 2 years, all the reserves in the city will be exhausted. The city filled with zombies will eventually die out. In the current situation, this process may accelerate." He couldn't change anything about the future. He could only allow Yao Yu to live in this world, one that was even more cruel and full of hardship. But at least, she would live. At this time, Zubo was injected with a green substance into his arm. In an instant, his strength began to return. He could feel his body regenerating. An unknown man in a black suit laughed and said, "This is how the monster controls the element of fire." Zubo, amazed by the rapid healing, exclaimed and thanked him, calling it a miracle medicine. The anomaly, curious about their motives, asked what organization they were from. The man replied that they were a team specializing in the search for anomalous creatures, aiming to create a new world where anomalous people could live happily. Zubo, skeptical but intrigued, asked, "Is a new world even possible? And are you also an anomalist?" The man answered, "Of course, and there are quite a few like me here." Zubo, now interested in his own transformation, asked if he could become like the fire monster. The man smiled slightly and replied, "It's possible for the sake of a happy new world, one without sorrow or worry." Meanwhile, at Pei Hospital, Jian stopped in front of a sign that read, "Private property. It is dangerous to enter." Ibi was preparing to put on an exoskeleton, and Xian asked, "Has this hospital been taken over by someone?" Ibi replied, "It's not surprising. This is a strategically important location. We'll take what we need and leave." Ibi broke the glass, and they entered the building. Xian remarked, "It's strange. It's completely silent. No one's here. No zombies either. Did everyone run away or hide? Or is it a trap?" As they ventured inside, Xian noticed bright graffiti on the wall, which read, "Get out of here, or you will meet death." I suggested they split up. Ibi would search for medicine, and Xian would gather equipment. "If anything happens, let me know," Ibi said. As Xian walked through the building, he muttered, "The second most hated place in my life is the hospital. The smell of peroxide always gets to me." He paused, sniffing the air. "But strangely, it's not peroxide. It's more like a sweet, fruity aroma." After these words, he immediately fell to the ground unconscious. Ibi asked what was going on and wondered aloud if the man was really just spouting nonsense. The familiar scent struck Ibi again, prompting his exoskeleton to activate its helmet with air filtration. Realizing the danger, he attacked the area from which the aroma originated, shattering the ceiling. Traces of an ominous smoke were revealed. "Shan!" Ibi shouted through the comms. "There are traps in the hospital. You need to leave immediately." As Ibi scanned the area, he caught sight of a shadowy figure. Reacting instinctively, he swung his exoskeleton-enhanced arm toward the figure, only to realize he was about to strike a young woman standing defiantly before him. She touched his exoskeleton, her eyes lighting up. "This is so cool. If I'm not mistaken," she said, examining it closely, "this exoskeleton could be made from pearls extracted from zombie brains, right?" Her smile widened as she added, "I'd be really grateful if you could introduce me to the creator of this. Oh, by the way, my name is Tang Tang, a sweet and brilliant MD." Ibi narrowed his eyes and asked, "Did you release poison gas in the hospital? And do you eat those pearls?" Tang Tang chuckled and admitted, "Well, yes. The gas is great for driving away zombies and dumbing down intruders. But eat pearls from zombie brains? Are they even edible? Evie ignored her question and shot back. It doesn't matter. Are you here alone? She smirked mischievously. Only one princess left in this abandoned castle, and you've come to kidnap her, haven't you? Just like a true villain. Evie growled. Aren't you afraid of death? Tang Tang's grin didn't falter. Death? Oh, it's as tempting to me as sweets in a candy store. I wouldn't mind dying from what I love. Evie shook his head, wondering if she was insane. Since you're an MD, he asked, what do you specialize in? Viral diseases, she replied, brushing her hair back nonchalantly. How did you discover pearls in zombie brains? Evie pressed. Did you use those pearls to create the gas? Tang Tang threw her hands up dramatically. Ugh, how annoying. All you do is ask endless questions and never answer mine? She pointed at him accusingly. So, will you introduce me to the creator of this exoskeleton or not? Evie paused, then reluctantly said, The research institute is on the other side of the city. If you want, I'll take you there. Tang Tang's face lit up with joy as she raised her hands and jumped in excitement. Yay! Oh, but there's one more tiny request, she said with a sly grin. You must agree to it. Xian dreamed of a deserted road where he sat in a car, phone in hand, talking to a group. A pink-haired girl on the line replied with irritation, I don't like people who can't keep promises. Another voice joined in, one of the guys on the call. This is our last job. Once it's done, we can finally go home and have a wedding. The girl scoffed. What a shame, she said with mock disdain. Xian grinned and chimed in. Now's not the time to be romantic. You two are a perfect couple. As the banter settled, the truck they had been waiting for came into view. It's the one Lao Xiao mentioned, Xian said. Everyone geared up, ready to follow the plan. They waited for the truck's passengers to arrive at the target location and Lao Xiao's signal to act. Peering out the window with excitement, Xian grabbed his earpiece. Pink-haired chick, Lao Xiao hasn't given the signal yet. Why did you start? Before an answer came, chaos erupted. The truck suddenly collided with the pink-haired girl's car, sending it spinning out of control. A biker guy, now in the thick of the action, was somehow caught in the chase. He shouted through the earpiece, Xian, get out of here! Something's gone wrong. Xian's adrenaline spiked as an unknown black van appeared out of nowhere and bore down on him. How did they figure us out? He thought. Slamming his foot on the gas pedal, Xian tried to escape, but just as the tension peaked, he jolted awake. The dream ended, leaving him disoriented and breathless. The man jolted upright, drawing the attention of both Evie and Tang Tang. Evie raised an eyebrow and asked sarcastically, Had a good nap? Now get to work. Xian, still trying to piece everything together, looked confused. Tang Tang smirked mischievously. Oh, did I forget to mention? You were poisoned by my specially crafted gas, she said, tilting her head innocently. If you don't get the antidote within the next 3 hours, you'll melt into a nice, gooey puddle of sludge. Xian's eyes widened. What? Who even are you? Evie groaned in frustration. Can we stop yelling and just load these cans into the car already? Xian blinked, incredulous. Wait, will someone explain what's happening here first? Tang Tang simply crossed her arms, her expression smug. These samples are crucial to my research. Now stop whining and help me move them. Xian muttered under his breath. Why does everyone force me to do things I don't want to? Tang Tang's smile turned icy. Oh, and if you break even one sample, she said, her voice laced with mock sweetness, I'll put you in one of these jars. Swallowing his retort, Xian reluctantly picked up one of the samples. She's a demon, he thought, his forehead glistening with sweat. Tang Tang clapped her hands in mock celebration. Ah, such gentlemen! Teamwork makes the dream work. As Yan handled the jars, his mind raced. Ibi recognized the effects of the gas Tang Tang mentioned, honey cloud. On the day everything went to hell, this gas was a tool of survival for gang leaders. They'd used it to repel zombies and terrorize enemies. He looked sideways at Tang Tang, her cheerful demeanor masking the calculating brilliance of her mind. Could she really be the creator of this gas? He wondered. He couldn't shake the thought. If Tang Tang was anything like Dr. Zhang, a genius mechanic and scientist, then she was a resource too valuable to fall into the wrong hands, especially those of the notorious Twilight Dragons. Whatever the case, one thing was clear. Keeping an eye on Tang Tang was no longer an option. It was a necessity. Xian dusted off his hands and sighed. Finally, we're done. Tang Tang, inspecting the car with an amused sparkle in her eyes, asked curiously, were black pearls also used in creating this? Such a cute car. It's perfect for a princess like me. Xian turned to Ibi and muttered under his breath, Are you sure we should take her with us? I'm pretty sure something's not right in her head. Ibi, busy organizing the equipment they'd gathered, replied, We've found all the medicines and supplies we need. With a doctor on our side, our chances of curing Yaoyu are a lot better. Before Xian could respond, a low growl echoed in the air, making the group freeze. A moment later, a massive, monstrous dog climbed onto the building, its grotesque form silhouetted against the sky. It roared loudly, the sound reverberating through the area like a thunderclap. Xian almost had a heart attack looking at the beast. Ibi shouted, Stop wasting time and get in the car! Now! The monstrous dog leaped from the building, but Ibi reacted swiftly, firing a concentrated beam that knocked the creature to the ground with a thunderous crash. Meanwhile, Xian and Tang Tang scrambled into the vehicle. Ibi glanced over, relieved to see them secured. Good! Get her out of here while you can, he yelled. I'll handle this thing. He charged at the monster, delivering a devastating blow with the exoskeleton's fist, followed by another powerful beam. As Xian stared out the window at the hulking beast, he couldn't help but exclaim, What kind of monster is this? It's huge! Tang Tang, nonchalantly observing the chaos, replied, Oh, that giant dog! It's been hanging around the hospital for days. Going outside has been a real hassle. Xian turned to her, incredulous. You knew this thing was lurking around and didn't think to mention it? Tang Tang shrugged. Well, you all came here prepared with such advanced equipment. I figured it wouldn't be a problem. Aren't you guys part of the Doomsday team or something? Humanity's last hope and all that? Xian groaned. This isn't the time for jokes. Tang Tang, unfazed, leaned back. I'm not joking. I've done extensive research on the zombie virus and the state of the world. The fact that you're still alive makes you pretty much chosen ones, don't you think? Xian glanced at her, his expression a mix of confusion and disbelief as Ibi faced the beast outside. At the same time, Ibi was locked in a fierce battle with an anomaly, a creature he recognized as a super beast. This wasn't a typical mutated animal infected by the zombie virus. No. This was something far more dangerous. A monstrosity bred using advanced genetic engineering and fused with the virus. A being that shouldn't exist in this timeline. The super beast unleashed an electric shock, forcing Ibi to act fast. He retaliated with a powerful beam attack, but the creature deflected it with the horns on its back. The monster lunged, its massive paw swiping dangerously close, but Ibi countered by grabbing hold of its horns and tearing them off with sheer force. The creature collapsed onto the asphalt, writhing in pain, and tried to unleash another electric shock. However, the attack failed to affect Ibi. He chuckled mockingly. What's wrong? That trick's not working anymore? Fine. Let me show you mine. With a swift leap, Ibi unleashed the full force of his beam attack, directing it straight at the monster's head. The relentless barrage left the super beast lifeless, its skull completely shattered. Approaching the fallen creature, Ibi tore into its flesh using the exoskeleton's enhanced strength, revealing a massive black pearl embedded within. Carefully extracting the pearl, he observed it closely. This is transformed black gold, he muttered. The pearl was the heart of the super beast, a key component in its unnatural creation. With this in hand, things will be much easier. An unknown man with glasses stood silently on the roof of a building overlooking the chaos below. His gaze lingered on Ibi, who had just emerged victorious from his battle with the super beast. The man seemed to be analyzing him, deep in thought. Ibi, unaware of the man's presence at first, attempted to contact Jian through his earpiece. However, the signal wasn't reaching. Jian and the others had gone too far. Frustrated, Ibi decided to regroup. As he climbed up a structure to survey the area, he caught sight of the man standing at the edge of the roof. The stranger greeted Ibi, his demeanor calm and unthreatening. But before he could say much, Ibi launched a sudden attack, firing a beam at him. The man dodged with ease, moving to another rooftop. "There's no need to be so impulsive," the man said, his voice steady. "I understand your bias toward anomalies, but I assure you, I mean no harm." Ibi ignored the words and attacked again, his hostility unwavering. The stranger smiled faintly, sidestepping the attack with unnatural speed. In a flash, he appeared on Ibi's exoskeleton arm, perched as if weightless. "I'm only here to deliver a message," the man said nonchalantly. "It won't take much of your time." Ibi snarled, tightening his grip on the exoskeleton's hand, attempting to crush the intruder. The man's tone remained composed. "Since you're comfortable with this arrangement, let's continue. I am Sunbin, from the Organization of Darkness." Sunbin continued, explaining that, by the technical consultant's order, Ibi was invited to a meeting in the Northern Industrial Zone. "Initially, the invitation was for the doctor's companion," Sunbin added with a smirk, "but given the circumstances, I'll extend it to you as well." Before Ibi could respond, his grip closed with a sickening crunch, but all that remained in his hand was a bloody stain. Sunbin had vanished. Ibi frowned, his mind racing. An anomaly, with the ability to replace itself with a bloody corpse, not exactly a threat, but infuriating. As he processed the encounter, Ibi's thoughts grew darker. The Organization of Darkness. It's already formed? The implications were dire. Ibi recalled the power of the organization from his memories of the future. 50 years after Judgment Day, they were the most powerful force in existence. They commanded vast resources, elite specialists, and cutting-edge technology. Their goal? To create a world dominated by supernatural beings, using advanced methods to breed anomalies like the super beast he had just fought. The realization hit him hard. Someone from the Organization of Darkness must have also returned from the future. Ibi knew he had to act. If the organization had begun its operations already, their actions could irreparably alter the course of events. He couldn't let their plans unfold unchecked. Before their conversation could continue, Dr. Jangan appeared, greeting them warmly. Tang Tang turned to him, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. "You must be the doctor who created the exoskeleton in those machines," she said eagerly. "I'm Tang Tang, also a doctor. I came here specifically to meet you." Jangan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "How did you know I'm a doctor?" Tang Tang smirked. "Despite your less than polished appearance, you can't hide the aura of a mad scientist." Jangan scratched his head, muttering to himself, "What has Ibi been telling her?" Clearing his throat, he replied, "I know you too. The youngest and most talented virologist. Your work's been published in top scientific journals." Tang Tang blushed at the compliment, laughing nervously. You flatter me, Doctor. She quickly shifted gears. But let's skip the pleasantries. I'm here to collaborate with you on studying the black pearls from the zombies' heads. You must know a lot about them to create such incredible technology. Jangin blinked in surprise. Black gold, he muttered. Tang Tang perked up. Is that what it's called? Did you name it that? The doctor hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. He decided to tread carefully, not wanting to expose all of Eebee's secrets. Still, the opportunity to collaborate with someone as skilled as Tang Tang was too valuable to pass up. Yes, let's work on this together, he finally said. I've made some interesting discoveries recently. Tang Tang's eyes gleamed with excitement. Perfect! Let's get started. Later, Jangan led Tang Tang to Yao Yu, who was lying in a room, pale and frail. Tang Tang examined her carefully, removing her mask with a sigh. Who is she to you? She asked Jangan. She's like a granddaughter to me, though we're not related by blood, he replied softly. Tang Tang's face darkened as she made a hand gesture. 3 months, she said grimly. Jangan's heart sank. 3 months? Are you sure? Tang Tang nodded. I've seen this illness countless times. Her body can't endure higher doses of chemotherapy, and the abnormal viruses make conventional treatments useless. We don't have much time. Desperation crept into Jangan's voice. What can we do? Tang Tang held up a black pearl. This is only the option we have left. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the content, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated.